Hey guys, tonight we journey back to ancient Crete, to the very conception of a structure so infamous. Its name became synonymous with inescapable complexity, the Labyrinth, home of the Minotaur. But this isn't just about the maze, it's about why its floor plan was, frankly, a surprisingly terrible idea from an architectural standpoint, even if inescapable was the primary design brief. Picture yourself on the sun-drenched shores of Crete, the scent of salt and wild thyme hanging heavy in the air, a gentle breeze whispering secrets through ancient olive groves that have seen empires rise and fall. Yet, beneath this idyllic, almost sleepy veneer, a tempest of divine retribution is brewing, a perfect storm of pride and punishment that will ultimately give birth to a creature of nightmare. And with such a creature comes the need for a prison of unprecedented, and if we're honest, hilariously impractical design. Honestly, if you were one of the unfortunate souls destined to explore this particular architectural marvel firsthand, your chances of seeing daylight again, let alone leaving a scathing review on some ancient equivalent of TripAdvisor, would be laughably slim. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and post your location and local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where you're all tuning in from as we drift off together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet feel the warm, slightly gritty earth of Crete beneath simple leather sandals. You are an observer, a shadow drifting through the grand halls and bustling marketplaces of Knossos, the heart of King Minos' domain. Minos. The name itself carries weight, echoing with power and a certain maritime authority. He is the ruler of a thalassocracy, a sea empire, his fleets connecting Crete to distant lands, bringing back tin, copper, ivory, and ideas. The Minoan civilization, flourishing in this Bronze Age, is a beacon of sophistication. Their palaces, like the sprawling complex at Knossos, are vibrant with color, adorned with breathtaking frescoes depicting scenes of leaping dolphins, graceful griffins, and, most notably, the dynamic, dangerous ritual of bull leaping. This isn't just sport, it's a profound cultural and perhaps religious expression, a testament to their complex relationship with these powerful creatures. You see lithe figures, both male and female, vaulting over the horns of charging bulls, a dance with death and divinity. The bull is everywhere, a symbol of strength, fertility, and untamed nature. King Minos, however, carries a restlessness within him. He has brothers, rivals for the throne, and though he holds power, he craves an undeniable sign, a divine endorsement that will silence all claimants and cement his rule as absolute, touched by the gods themselves. And so, you watch as he stands on the Cretan shore, the turquoise waters of the Aegean lapping at his feet, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He raises his voice in prayer, not to just any deity, but to Poseidon, the mighty earthshaker, ruler of the seas, brother of Zeus. His plea is specific. Send forth from the sea. He implores a bull, a magnificent specimen for sacrifice, and all will know that you, Poseidon, favor my reign. He makes a solemn vow this divine bull, a gift from the god, will be consecrated and sacrificed in Poseidon's honor. The air crackles with anticipation. The sea, usually restless, seems to hold its breath. And then you see it. Parting the waves, emerging from the deep blue, is a bull unlike any seen before. It's not just its size, though it is formidable, but its color, a dazzling pure white, like sea foam solidified, or a creature sculpted from the whitest Parian marble and brought to life. Its horns gleam like polished silver in the Mediterranean sun, and its eyes hold a spark of something otherworldly. A collective gasp ripples through the onlookers. This is no ordinary beast, it is clearly divine, a creature of myth made real. You feel the awe, the prickle of sacred fear. Poseidon has answered, and how? But here, as you observe Minos' expression, you see the seed of a terrible misjudgment being sown. His eyes, initially wide with reverent gratitude, now gleam with a different light avarice, pride. The bull is too perfect, too magnificent to be given up, even to a god. Surely, he reasons, Poseidon, who has countless beasts of the sea, wouldn't miss this one. He could add it to his own royal herds, a living testament to divine favor, a prize to be admired, not burned on an altar. So, with a flick of his wrist and a quiet word to his herdsman, the pure white bull is led away to join the royal cattle, and a substitute, a lesser, though still impressive, bull from Minos' own stock is chosen for the sacrifice. A simple switch. What could possibly go wrong? You almost want to shout a warning, a reminder that the gods of Olympus have notoriously sensitive egos and a very, very long memory for slights, especially broken vows concerning things they specifically sent. Minos, basking in the glow of his cleverness, proceeds with the altered sacrifice, perhaps thinking himself quite the shrewd negotiator. Poseidon, as you might expect, is not fooled, nor is he remotely pleased. Imagine the scene from the god's perspective. He's gone to the trouble of creating this masterpiece of a bull, sent it as a clear sign, and this mortal king, this upstart, thinks he can pull a fast one. The insult stings. The god of the sea, master of earthquakes and storms, feels the anger rise like a monstrous wave. But his revenge, buddy, when it comes, is not a straightforward blast of divine power. It's more insidious, more personal, designed to strike at the heart of Minos' pride and create a scandal that will echo through the ages. He turns his vengeful gaze upon Minos' wife, Queen Pasiphae. Pasiphae, her name, some say, means all shining, and she is often described as a daughter of Helios, the sun god, and Perseus, an Oceanid nymph, making her a demigoddess with connections to sorcery. Historians still argue whether Pasiphae was depicted in original tellings as a powerful sorceress, a victim of circumstance, or a morally ambiguous figure. Regardless of her own powers, she becomes the unwilling instrument of Poseidon's curse. The god inflicts upon her an unnatural, all-consuming passion, a maddening desire for the very same pure white bull that Minos so foolishly saved. You observe the queen in her private chambers. The rich tapestries seem to mock her. The scent of herbs and flowers in the palace gardens turns cloying. She fights it. You can see the struggle in her eyes, the flush on her cheeks, the way her hands tremble. But the divine compulsion is too strong, a relentless tide of forbidden longing. It's a humiliating, deeply disturbing affliction. How does one confess such a thing? Minos, dear, I seem to have developed a rather intense crush on your prize bull, the one you were supposed to sacrifice to that rather important sea god you annoyed. Not exactly casual dinner conversation, even for royalty known for their eccentricities. In her desperation, Pasiphae seeks out the one man in Crete whose genius might offer a solution, however unorthodox Daedalus. He is an Athenian, an inventor, an architect, a sculptor of renown, a man who can seemingly make marvels from bronze, wood, and stone. He's the kind of person who, if you asked him to build a self-folding toga, would probably have a working prototype by lunchtime. Pasiphae, her mind consumed by the god-sent obsession, presents her bizarre, shocking request. She needs a way to approach the bull, to deceive it. Daedalus, for his part, must have been taken aback. This wasn't exactly a standard commission for a royal artisan. Perhaps he felt pity. Perhaps he was bound by an oath to serve the royal family. Or perhaps the sheer audacity of the engineering challenge intrigued him. Some ancient writers delight in describing the solution he devised: a hollow wooden cow, constructed with such uncanny skill that it was indistinguishable from a real heifer. He built it on wheels, so it could be moved into the meadow where the white bull grazed, and covered it with actual cowhide. He even, according to some, perfected the scent It was, in its own way, a masterpiece of deceptive engineering, quirky and frankly unsettling. Tidbit is how some texts almost praise Daedalus's craftsmanship in this venture, as if building a convincing bovine disguise for an illicit rendezvous was just another feather in his inventor's cap. One can only imagine the blueprints. Perhaps Daedalus, ever the professional, muttered to himself, "Well, if you're going to do something this weird, you might as well do it with unparalleled skill." Pasiphae, concealed within Daedalus's creation, is wheeled into the field. The great white bull, perhaps sensing something of its own divine nature, or perhaps just thoroughly fooled by the expert disguise, approaches. The union takes place. The curse of Poseidon is fulfilled in a way that ensures maximum scandal and lasting horror. Months pass. The court buzzes with whispers. Pasiphae's pregnancy is not like her others, and when the time comes for the birth, the midwives recoil. What emerges is a creature that embodies the unnatural union, the body of a human infant, but with the head and, as it grows, the tail of a bull. This is Asterion, the Starry One, as he was sometimes named, perhaps in a vain attempt to link him to the Celestial, but he will become known to history by a more blunt and descriptive title, the Minotaur, literally the Bull of Minos. Imagine Minos' reaction. This isn't just a family crisis, it's a state emergency, a divine mark of shame upon his reign. His carefully constructed image of a divinely favored king is shattered. In its place is this monstrous infant, a living, breathing symbol of his broken vow and Pasiphae's god-inflicted degradation. He can't simply dispose of the child. It is, after all, his stepson, and doubly divine in its cursed heritage. To harm it might provoke even greater wrath from Poseidon, or perhaps from Pasiphae's father, Helios. Yet he cannot allow it to be seen, to roam free. As the Minotaur grows, so does its unnatural strength and, in most tellings of the tale, its craving for human flesh. The royal nursery quickly becomes inadequate. The palace is no place for a growing, bull-headed man-eater. Minos needed a solution, not just a strong cage, but something more profound. Something to hide this shame, to contain this danger, to make it effectively disappear from the world while still existing within it. The initial divine slight, the affair of the bull, has now birthed a monstrous problem requiring a uniquely terrible, uniquely inescapable, and ultimately uniquely bad floor plan. The dust from Pasiphae's bizarre bovine rendezvous has barely settled, and already King Minos is pacing his throne room like a caged lion, a rather apt simile given the circumstances. The problem, young Asterion, the Minotaur, is growing. His infant cries, tinged with an unnerving bull-like timbre, are morphing into something more guttural, more challenging to ignore. You see Minos wring his hands, his royal brow deeply furrowed. The whispers in the palace are growing louder, the sideways glances more frequent. He needs a solution, and he needs it yesterday. His gaze falls upon Daedalus, the genius artisan who, let's be honest, enabled part of this mess with his all-too-effective wooden cow. Perhaps it's a case of you broke it, you bought it. Or maybe Minos simply recognizes that a mind capable of such ingenious deception is exactly what he needs now. Daedalus is summoned. You imagine him entering the throne room, perhaps still with a faint scent of sawdust and innovation clinging to his tunic. He's a figure of quiet intensity, his eyes sharp, missing nothing. Minos doesn't mince words. "Daedalus," he commands, his voice tight with urgency and a thinly veiled desperation. "I need a structure, an enclosure, but not just any enclosure. It must be a place from which escape is inconceivable." He gestures vaguely, as if trying to physically shape the complexity he envisions. "I want you to build a prison for him." And here his voice drops, the shame and fury evident. For the Minotaur, a place of such intricate, devious turnings that, once inside, no creature, man or beast, could ever find its way out. Ever. The unspoken parts of this royal decree hang heavy in the air, This structure must not only imprison the monster, but also entomb the scandal, hide the kingdom's shame deep within its unfathomable heart. Daedalus listens, his expression unreadable. What is he thinking? Is he appalled, intrigued by the sheer audacity of the architectural challenge? Or does he simply see it as another commission, a complex problem awaiting an elegant, if dark, solution? Remember, this is the man who built the deceptive cow. His moral compass, when it comes to royal requests, might already be a little flexible. Who is this Daedalus? Really, he's not just some skilled local craftsman. In the grand tapestry of Greek myth, he is the inventor, the master architect, the sculptor whose creations were so lifelike they blurred the line between art and reality. Legend whispers that his statues could see, could walk, and had to be tethered to prevent them from simply wandering off on their own. Imagine owning a sculpture so realistic you have to put it on a leash. Hold on. Let me just tie down Hercules before he rearranges the furniture again. He was said to have been taught his craft by Athena, the goddess of wisdom and crafts, herself, or perhaps by Hephaestus, the divine smith. Born an Athenian, some say of royal lineage, a descendant of King Erechtheus, he carried the spark of genius, a mind that saw angles and solutions where others saw only empty space or intractable problems. You can almost picture his workshop a place alive with the hum of creation, filled with ingenious tools, many of his own invention. No doubt, half-finished automata, scrolls covered in intricate diagrams, the air thick with the scent of worked wood, cooling bronze, and the almost tangible aura of focused intellect. Yet, for all his brilliance, Daedalus carries a shadow in his past, a stain on his reputation that led him to Crete in the first place. Back in Athens, he had an apprentice, his own nephew, known as Perdix or sometimes Talos. Perdix was a prodigy, a young man whose inventive mind was perhaps even more agile, more intuitive than Daedalus's own. While still a youth, Perdix is credited with inventing the saw, inspired by the jagged spine of a fish or, in another telling, the jawbone of a serpent. He also conceived of the potter's wheel, revolutionizing ceramic production, and the compass, for drawing perfect circles and arcs. These were not minor tinkerings. The invention of such tools marked significant leaps in technological capability, cornerstones of civilization that we often take for granted. Daedalus, the established master, saw his own brilliance being eclipsed. Consumed by a bitter, gnawing jealousy, he allegedly lured Perdix to the top of the Acropolis, the sacred citadel of Athens, and pushed him off. A truly dark moment for such an enlightened mind. But Athena, who favored young talent, intervened as Perdix fell, transforming him into a partridge, a bird that henceforth would always fly low, never nesting in high places, forever mindful of its dramatic fall. For this crime, Daedalus was exiled from Athens, finding refuge and employment in the court of King Minos on Crete. Does Minos know the full story? Did it come up in the job interview? So, Daedalus, references look good. A bit of a gap here. Anything we should know about your departure from Athens? Any high-altitude disagreements? Probably not. Kings in desperate need of unique talents often overlook inconvenient truths. This dark episode, however, reveals a crucial facet of Daedalus's character, his immense pride and the terrifying lengths he might go to when that pride is threatened. It adds a chilling layer to his acceptance of Minos's current commission. Is he the right man to design a place of hopeless confinement? Perhaps his own experience with envy and its dark consequences gives him a unique insight into creating structures that reflect or amplify such negative emotions. So, Daedalus accepts the task? The initial brief is clear, inescapable, utterly bewildering, strong enough to hold a growing monster, and all to be done with utmost secrecy. You can see him in his study, parchment spread out, a stylus in hand. He's not just drawing lines, he's mapping out despair. He's considering how to weaponize space, how to turn architecture itself into an agent of psychological erosion. The concept of a labyrinth, a complex network of paths, wasn't entirely new to the ancient world. The famous Egyptian labyrinth, for instance, located at Hawara near the Fayum oasis, was a vast mortuary temple complex attached to the pyramid of Pharaoh Amenemhat III. The Greek historian Herodotus, who visited it in the 5th century BCE, described it with awe, claiming its intricate series of courtyards, chambers, and colonnades, with 12 main courts and reportedly 3,000 rooms half above ground, half below, surpassed even the Great Pyramids in its wondrous complexity. This is a fascinating, if slightly quirky, tidbit. Herodotus was clearly blown away, suggesting its purpose was far more than just a tomb, likely a major administrative and religious center. However, its aim was probably to inspire awe and protect sacred rites, not to eternally confuse a single monstrous occupant. Daedalus is taking this idea of complexity to a whole new, far more sinister level. Historians still argue whether ancient labyrinth designs, like those found on Cretan coins or in later Roman mosaics, were intended to be truly unsolvable puzzles or were more symbolic, representing a challenging but ultimately navigable journey, perhaps with a single, convoluted path to a sacred center. But Minos' request is explicit. This is not a spiritual journey. It's a one-way ticket to oblivion. Daedalus must design a structure that actively fights against solution. This is where we get to the core of the surprisingly bad floor plan concept. Most architecture, even for prisons, aims for some level of functionality for those who manage it. Guards need to patrol. Supplies need to be delivered. A certain order must be maintained. Daedalus, however, is tasked with creating intentional systemic dysfunction. You imagine his design principles: endless identical corridors to break down any sense of direction, dead ends that mock any attempt at progress, paths that loop back on themselves, creating a dizzying sense of déjà vu. Perhaps subtle inclines or declines in the floor, barely perceptible, but designed to throw off one's internal compass. No windows or windows that open onto more blank walls, offering no external reference points. The play of light and shadow, or perhaps perpetual, unnerving twilight, would be crucial. Echoes that distort sound, or sections of eerie silence that heighten anxiety. You are here. Maps. Daedalus would probably sketch them in a language only he understood, then burn them for good measure. He considers the inhabitant the Minotaur. Part man, part bull. What are its senses? How does it perceive the world? The design must counter its animal strength and cunning, exploit any human-like capacity for frustration and despair. This isn't just about building walls, it's about crafting an environment of perpetual sensory and cognitive dissonance. The labyrinth must become a physical manifestation of hopelessness. Home sweet home. This is not, you think, more like home sweet labyrinth of soul-crushing monotony and zero chance of parole. The weight of this creation must be immense. Daedalus, the brilliant artist, the man who could breathe life into stone and bronze, is now channeling all his formidable intellect, all his unparalleled skill, into a project whose sole purpose is to confine, to confuse, to break a spirit. Is there a flicker of hesitation in his eyes as he drafts these blueprints of despair? Or is he lost in the intricate challenge, the ultimate puzzle box, detached from the grim reality of its future occupant? He is, after all, the man who fled Athens under a dark cloud. Perhaps building a place to contain a monster resonates with some hidden part of his own psyche. A man who knows what it's like to harbor something dark within. He is designing the perfect trap, a monument to misdirection, using every trick of perspective, every architectural sleight of hand he can conjure. The foundation stones of the labyrinth are about to be laid, not just in the earth of Crete, but in the annals of myth, a testament to genius twisted to a dark purpose. Daedalus retreats into the depths of his inventive mind, the king's chilling mandate echoing within him. utter confusion, perpetual disorientation, inescapable. This isn't a request for a sturdy cage or a high-security wing in the palace. Minos wants an architectural abyss, a place where the very concept of direction dissolves, where hope goes to die a slow, bewildering death. You watch as Daedalus, the master craftsman, wrestles with this. How does one intentionally design failure? How do you take the principles of order, harmony, and clarity that usually guide an architect's hand and invert them to create their perfect, nightmarish opposites? He unrolls fresh parchments, the papyrus crackling softly in the otherwise quiet room. His stylus, usually so quick to sketch elegant solutions, now traces hesitant, then increasingly bold lines, forming patterns that seem to writhe and coil back upon themselves. He builds small models from Cretan clay, his fingers shaping miniature corridors that twist and turn with no apparent logic, only to be crushed and reformed moments later. He's not searching for flow. He's meticulously engineering its absence. The core of his design philosophy for this labyrinth, you realize, is to assault the senses and systematically dismantle the occupant's ability to form a mental map. First, the corridors imagine stretches of passage, built with unnerving uniformity. Each turn, whether left or right, leads to a vista identical to the one before. The same height, the same width, the same texture of stone, perhaps even the same faint, musty smell. You try to count your steps, to mark a turn by some imperfection in the wall, but such distinguishing features are deliberately absent or so subtly varied as to be useless. Your mind scrambles for purchase, for a landmark, and finds none. Progress becomes meaningless when every step forward feels like a return. Then come the dead ends. These are not mere architectural oopsies. They are calculated insults. You follow a passage that seems to promise an opening, perhaps a glimmer of different light, a change in the echo of your own footsteps. It winds, it turns, it draws you deeper, and then, abruptly, it stops. A blank wall, a cold, indifferent face of stone that seems to mock your wasted effort. Fooled you. It almost sneers. All that way for nothing. Now, retrace your steps, if you can even remember them. Some of these cul-de-sacs might be short, others deceptively long, each one a tiny death to the spirit of exploration. The illusion of choice becomes another of Daedalus's cruel tools. Junctions where 2, 3, even 4 passages diverge, offering the semblance of options, of agency. Which way to go? You pick one, driven by gut feeling or a desperate attempt at logic, only to find it eventually loops back to a point you vaguely recall, or perhaps one you are certain you've passed before, though now it feels subtly different. Or is that just your mind playing tricks the Minotaur, and anyone else unfortunate enough to be inside would be caught in a Sisyphean cycle of decision and regret, each choice leading only to deeper entanglement? It's like being trapped in the universe's most frustrating call center phone tree, where every option selected just routes you back to the main menu. Only there's no dial 0 for operator option here. Crucially, Daedalus understands the importance of isolating the labyrinth's interior from the outside world. No windows revealing the position of the sun or stars, no comforting glimpses of a familiar landscape. If there are openings, they lead only to other featureless courtyards or light wells that offer no clue to direction, casting an unvarying, diffuse illumination, or plunging areas into profound shadow. Time itself would become elastic, distorted. Is it day? Is it night? How long have you been walking? Hours, days. The natural rhythms that govern life outside these walls would cease to have meaning. The Minoan palaces, like the one at Knossos under which some traditions say the labyrinth was built, were known for their complex layouts, but they also incorporated ingenious light wells and courts to bring illumination and air into their depths. This is a well-documented aspect of Minoan architecture, a testament to their sophisticated building techniques. Daedalus, however, would take this principle and twist it, using light not to clarify but to confuse, or denying it altogether to create a disorienting gloom. Sensory manipulation is key. Consider the acoustics. Daedalus might design corridors that act as echo chambers, making the Minotaur's own roars or the shuffling of its hooves rebound from unpredictable angles, creating phantom companions or threats. Other sections could be eerily quiet, the stone treated to absorb sound, making the silence itself a heavy, oppressing presence. Imagine the drip of water somewhere, always just out of reach, a sound that could drive one to madness. The very texture of the walls might be a tool, a monotonous sameness that denies tactile information, or perhaps subtle shifts in stonework that trick one into thinking they've found a different section, only for it to be another layer of deception. The floors, too, might have almost imperceptible slopes, not enough to consciously notice, but enough to gradually throw off your inner sense of balance and direction over time. Daedalus, in this, is playing the role of a rather grim experimental psychologist. His blueprint is designed to induce a specific set of reactions, the steady erosion of hope, the creeping tendrils of anxiety blossoming into full-blown panic, the breakdown of cognitive function under relentless disorientation. Historians still argue whether the labyrinth in myth was conceived as a purely passive structure, its complexity alone being the trap, or if it possessed almost magical properties, an inherent power to confound and mislead. Either way, Daedalus is its architect, the mortal mind behind its preternatural ability to ensnare. He is creating an environment that feels alive, malevolent, a stone monster that actively resists any attempt to understand it. And this brings us to the inherent badness of this floor plan. In conventional architectural terms, efficiency. Forget it. This labyrinth is the antithesis of efficiency. Think about the practicalities. How would the Minotaur be fed? How would its waste be managed? These are grim, mundane questions, but they highlight the plan's flaws if its purpose were anything other than pure, agonizing containment. There could be no easy access routes for staff. Did Daedalus design one incredibly tortuous, secret path known only to a select few, tasked with the terrifying job of leaving offerings or cleaning up, always risking becoming lost themselves? The Minotaur's zookeepers probably demanded some serious hazard pay, and a very, very good map. You can't help but think. Or perhaps the offerings were simply thrown over a high wall into an outer section, a crude and desperate measure. This profound lack of consideration for any kind of managed interaction or maintenance is what makes it a spectacularly bad design for anything other than its bleak, singular purpose. Some esoteric interpretations, often found in more niche spiritual or psychological circles, view the labyrinth not as a prison but as a sacred path for initiation or meditation. The idea is that by walking its complex, unicursal single-path patterns, one can achieve an altered state of consciousness, a symbolic journey to one's own center and back out into the world. Transformed. This is a quirky, alternative take on the labyrinth symbol, a stark contrast to the Minotaur's multi-cursal, many-pathed maze of despair. Daedalus's creation is a perversion of this concept. It's an initiation into madness, a journey to the center of terror with no enlightened return. If this labyrinth was intended for any kind of spiritual journey, the Minotaur was likely aiming for transcendental calm, but kept hitting existential dread because the cosmic GPS was clearly on the fritz. You see Daedalus at last, rolling up his final set of plans? A faint, almost imperceptible smile plays on his lips. Is it grim satisfaction at solving such a complex and terrible puzzle, or a chilling awareness of the monumental power of his own intellect, capable of conceiving such an engine of desolation? He has poured all his genius, all his knowledge of engineering, psychology, and perhaps even his own darker experiences into these drawings. This labyrinth he has designed is more than just a building. It's an idea, a physical manifestation of hopelessness, a structure whose very stones will whisper of confusion and despair. The design mandate was utter confusion, and Daedalus, the brilliant architect, is about to deliver it in spades. The parchments, covered in Daedalus's intricate, almost feverish designs for the labyrinth, are presented to King Minos. You watch the king's face as he studies them. There's no flicker of joy, no architect's pride reflected in his patron. Instead, you see a grim tightening of the jaw, a dark satisfaction, perhaps even a shiver of apprehension at the sheer, cold genius of the plan. This will work. This will swallow the monster and the shame it represents. The royal command is given. Terse and heavy with consequence. Build it. Now, where do you even begin to construct such a monumental nightmare? The popular imagination, largely thanks to Sir Arthur Evans's early 20th century excavations and his somewhat romanticized interpretations, often situates the labyrinth directly beneath the sprawling palace of Knossos. Evans, by naming the vast, complex structure he unearthed the Palace of Minos, inextricably linked it with the myths of the Minotaur and its maze. And indeed, the palace itself, with its myriad rooms, winding corridors, light wells, and different levels, can feel labyrinthine even to a modern visitor. However, constructing an entirely new, even more complex, and deliberately confusing subterranean structure beneath an existing, bustling royal palace, all while keeping its true nature a secret, would be an engineering and logistical feat of almost unimaginable difficulty. Think of the noise, the excavation, the sheer volume of earth and rock to be moved. Not exactly subtle. Perhaps, then, Daedalus chose a site nearby, a desolate, rocky valley hidden from common view, or even an existing network of caves that could be expanded and reshaped into the bewildering form he envisioned. You see his keen eyes surveying the Cretan landscape, seeking the perfect canvas for his masterpiece of misdirection. Once chosen, surveyors, sworn to secrecy and working under Daedalus's unwavering gaze, begin to mark out the vast, unsettling footprint of the future labyrinth upon the earth. The scale is already daunting. Then comes the gathering of resources. Imagine the sheer quantity of stone required, massive blocks hewn from distant quarries, dragged by immense effort, by teams of oxen or sweating laborers, across the rugged Cretan terrain. Timber for scaffolding, for supports in unstable sections, for the heavy doors that might seal certain passages. Bronze for tools, chisels, hammers, saws, constantly needing to be resharpened or replaced. The supply lines themselves would be a major operation, one that Daedalus would need to manage with an iron grip to prevent loose talk or prying eyes. And who would undertake the actual labor of building this monument to confusion skilled? Stonemasons, and of course, men who understood their craft, but also a vast workforce of unskilled laborers needed for the brute force of digging, hauling, and lifting. Were these local Cretans, perhaps tempted by good wages but increasingly uneasy about the strange, windowless, ever-twisting structure they were raising? If so, how was their silence ensured? Or, as was common in many large-scale ancient construction projects, was the bulk of the workforce composed of slaves, prisoners of war, individuals whose lives were considered expendable, and whose understanding of the Cretan language or the overall design could be intentionally limited? This would certainly aid in maintaining the veil of secrecy Minos so desperately desired. Daedalus, you realize, would have had to be a master of compartmentalization, ensuring that no single worker or team ever grasped the complete, terrifying picture of what they were creating. Each crew would build their assigned section, their corridor, their dead end, without knowing how it connected to the whole. You are now a silent observer on the construction site itself. The Cretan sun beats down, or perhaps you are already descending into the cool, damp beginnings of subterranean passages. The air is thick with stone dust, the clang of hammers on chisels, the grating sound of heavy blocks being levered into place. But it's not like any ordinary building site. There's an undercurrent of something else. Fear, perhaps, or a grim, unspoken understanding of the project's sinister purpose. Daedalus is everywhere, a figure of focused energy, his eyes missing no detail. He carries the true master plans, possibly encoded or drawn in sections that only he can fully interpret, revealing only what is necessary for the immediate task at hand. "Right, lads," you can almost hear him say with a chillingly calm demeanor. "This perfectly straight corridor you've just spent a week building excellent work. Now I need you to add 3 identical, pointless alcoves on the left, and make that end wall look exactly like the one you built yesterday 5 turns back." No, don't question it. It's perspective. The very act of building confusion must have been an exercise in controlled chaos. How do you instruct someone to build an error, a deliberately misleading feature, without them either correcting it out of habit or becoming hopelessly lost themselves? Perhaps Daedalus had them build sections that seemed logical, only to then direct them to add contradictory elements, to brick up apparent throughways or to create false doors that led nowhere. Security would be stifling. Elite guards, handpicked by Minos for their loyalty and discretion, would patrol the perimeter. No unauthorized eyes, no plans left lying around. And what of the workers who inadvertently saw too much? Or those who talked too freely in the taverns after a long day's labor? The myth is often discreetly silent on such matters, but the implication hangs heavy in the air. Some secrets are best kept by those who can no longer tell them. Naturally, such a complex undertaking would not be without its challenges. Engineering problems would arise daily, a section of unstable earth threatening to collapse. The need for ventilation shafts to provide air to the deeper recesses even a monster needs to breathe, though perhaps not fresh, pleasant air, and the constant battle against water seepage in the subterranean portions. Daedalus's genius would be pushed to its limits, solving not just the grand puzzle of the layout, but also these myriad practical issues. Accidents, too, were inevitable. In the dim light, with heavy materials and a disorienting environment, men would be injured. Perhaps worse. These incidents would be swiftly, quietly handled. The project driven relentlessly forward, keeping up the morale, or more likely, the terrified obedience, of a workforce engaged in creating something so palpably evil would have been a constant struggle. Another perfectly baffling junction completed. Team King Minos is exceptionally pleased with the progress towards total, inescapable despair. Probably not the speech they got, but it captures the mood. There's a quirky, almost fringe idea that some ancient sacred sites were built according to principles of sacred geometry, using mathematical ratios and astronomical alignments to create harmony and connect with celestial energies. If Daedalus knew of such principles, you can imagine him deliberately inverting them, using geometry and proportion to create unease, discord, and a profound sense of disorientation. Historians still argue whether the complex layouts of ancient sites like Knossos were primarily driven by practical needs, evolving organically over centuries, or if they encoded deeper symbolic, religious, or cosmological meanings in their very stones. For the Labyrinth, Daedalus's intent was unequivocally to encode confusion. As the months, perhaps years, wear on, the labyrinth takes shape, or rather, shapelessness. It grows like a stone tumor in the earth, a sprawling network of calculated chaos. Daedalus himself is a changed man. The immense mental strain of holding this entire, impossible structure in his mind, of ensuring every deceptive twist and every false promise of an exit is perfectly executed, has etched lines of fatigue and fierce concentration onto his face. He is the sole architect, the master builder, the only living being who will ever truly understand its intricate deceptions. His relationship with the workers is one of awe and fear. They respect his undeniable skill but are wary of his intense focus and the dark aura of the project he commands. You can almost hear one worker whisper to another. He doesn't just draw the plans, he dreams them, and they're not happy dreams. Finally, the day arrives. The last stone is levered into place. The final, misleading passage is sealed. The entrance, or perhaps multiple false entrances and one true, cleverly hidden one, is complete. Daedalus conducts a final, solitary tour, his footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. Minos, too, perhaps takes a terrified, cursory look, wanting to see his command fulfilled but also desperate to escape its unnerving presence. The workers, their task done, are gathered. What becomes of them? Are they richly rewarded and sworn to secrecy under the most terrible oaths imaginable? Or are they quietly retired to ensure the labyrinth's secrets remain eternally safe? The stories rarely dwell on the fate of the labyrinth's builders, but the silence is ominous. The stage is now set, the bewildering edifice. Knossos' nightmare stands ready for its monstrous occupant. The great, bewildering structure now stands complete, a silent testament to Daedalus' genius and King Minos' desperate decree. The construction crews have dispersed, their fates uncertain, their knowledge of the labyrinth's true nature hopefully contained. Whether they were handsomely paid and sworn to secrecy on pain of divine retribution, or simply vanished, is a detail the storytellers often gloss over with a delicate cough. What remains is the labyrinth itself, an oppressive presence, coiling beneath the Cretan soil or nestled within its hidden valley. You can almost feel the air around it crackling with anticipation, a heavy stillness pregnant with the dread of what is to come. It is a place built for one specific, monstrous purpose, and its doors, however cleverly concealed, are about to open for its primary and perpetual resident. Now, before we usher in the star of this architectural horror show, let's take a moment to clarify our terms. You've heard labyrinth, you've heard maze. In our everyday modern chatter, we tend to use them as synonyms for any old confusing network of paths, like that IKEA store layout on a busy Saturday. But in the ancient world, and particularly when we're dissecting the clever cruelty of Daedalus' design, the distinction is rather important. Understanding this difference is key to appreciating why this floor plan was so ingeniously and malevolently bad for anyone trapped within. Picture, if you will, the classical labyrinth design. You've probably seen it, even if you didn't know its formal name. It's the iconic pattern often found on ancient Cretan coins, etched into rocks in various parts of the world, or laid out in church paving stones. This is the seven-circuit Cretan labyrinth, and its defining characteristic is that it's unicursal. That means it has only one single, continuous, non-branching path. From the entrance, the path winds and turns, seemingly folding in on itself, filling the available space in a mesmerizing pattern, but it will always, without fail, lead you to the center. And from the center, that very same path, if retraced, will lead you back out to the entrance. You cannot get lost. There are no choices to make, no dead ends to frustrate you, no wrong turns possible. Its purpose wasn't to confuse, but to guide. It was often used for rituals, meditative walks, symbolic pilgrimages, or even dances. The journey itself was the point, a winding but ultimately assured passage to a central goal and back again. Think of it as one of those incredibly long, winding queues at a popular theme park ride. You know you'll get there eventually, and there's only one way to go. But it feels like you're seeing every nook and cranny of the roped-off area before you reach your destination. Then, there's the maze. This is where Daedalus truly earned his paycheck from King Minos. A maze is multicursal. It's a puzzle. It has multiple paths, branching choices, frustrating dead ends, and loops that can send you right back where you started. Tearing your hair out? This is where you can get profoundly, hopelessly lost. The intention behind a maze is to challenge, to confuse, to test your wits and your luck. Daedalus didn't build a simple, meditative labyrinth for the Minotaur. Oh no. He crafted a full-blown, high-stakes, escape room from Hades type of maze. The Minotaur wasn't meant to go on a contemplative stroll. It was meant to be perpetually bewildered, trapped in a choose-your-own-adventure story where every choice was wrong and every page just led to more confusion. So why does this distinction matter so much when we're talking about the Minotaur's prison? Well, if Daedalus had built a classical, unicursal labyrinth, even a very large and complex-looking one, the Minotaur, a creature of considerable strength and presumably some animal cunning, would eventually find the center. And, more importantly, it could simply turn around and follow that same single path back out. Not much of an inescapable prison, is it? The sheer terror and genius of Daedalus's labyrinth lies precisely in its maze-like qualities. It's the constant barrage of choices, the crushing disappointment of each dead end, the disorienting realization that you're covering the same ground again and again, that breaks down the will to escape. It's a bad floor plan because it's an active, aggressive obstacle to navigation, a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. It's interesting to note that even ancient writers sometimes use the terms somewhat interchangeably, or the exact nature of historical labyrinths, like the famed Egyptian one Pliny the Elder wrote about alongside the Cretan one, is still a subject of some academic discussion. Was the Egyptian labyrinth a true maze, or a vastly complex unicursal religious building? The labyrinth design that appears on Cretan coins, particularly from Knossos during periods associated with the myth, is typically the classical seven-circuit unicursal pattern. This has led to a fascinating scholarly debate. Scholars continue to debate whether the iconic seven-circuit Cretan labyrinth design found on ancient coins represented the actual mythical labyrinth of the Minotaur, a pre-existing sacred symbol co-opted by the story, or if it was a later, simplified visual shorthand for a much more complex maze-like structure imagined in the full narrative of the myth. Perhaps the story evolved, and the idea of the labyrinth became more menacing, morphing from a symbolic complex path into an actual deadly trap. The psychological impact of each type of structure is profoundly different. Walking a unicursal labyrinth can be a calming, centering experience. There's a sense of order of following a predetermined path that, despite its twists and turns, offers a secure journey. A multicursal maze, however, is designed to induce the opposite anxiety, frustration, even panic. The loss of control, the inability to make sensible choices, the constant failure. These are the very emotions Minos would have wanted to inflict upon his monstrous stepson. You can feel the difference viscerally. Imagine walking a clearly defined garden path that winds elegantly through flower beds towards a beautiful statue. Now imagine being thrust into a dense, high-hedged maze at twilight, with every turn looking the same and a growing sense of being watched. One is a pleasant stroll, the other is the stuff of nightmares. This brings us to a quirky, yet relevant, tidbit: the use of labyrinth patterns in much later contexts, such as the floors of medieval European cathedrals, like the famous one at Chartres in France, or as turf mazes cut into English hillsides. These were typically unicursal labyrinths, and walking them was often seen as a form of devotional practice, a miniature pilgrimage to Jerusalem for those who couldn't make the actual journey. It was about contemplation, repentance, and a symbolic spiritual journey. It's a world away from the Minotaur's pagan prison in Crete, yet it shows the enduring symbolic power of the labyrinth form, adapted and reinterpreted across cultures and belief systems. One can only chuckle at the thought of some well-meaning medieval monk trying to walk the Chartres labyrinth for penance, only to find that some mischievous architect, inspired by a misremembered tale of Daedalus, had decided to spice it up with a few dead ends and looping passages. Brother Alaric seems to be on his 5th hour of penance for that stolen tart. I think he might be genuinely lost in the nave again. Daedalus, then, didn't just build a labyrinth? He took the visual intricacy suggested by the term and transformed it into a truly diabolical maze. He perverted the concept of a guided journey into a blueprint for perpetual imprisonment. His design was an act of profound architectural malice, specifically engineered to prevent any straightforward passage, to turn every attempt at navigation into a step deeper into confusion. The surprise in its surprisingly bad floor plan isn't just that it's confusing. It's that its entire raison d'etre is to be a triumph of anti-navigation, an exquisite and terrifyingly effective instrument of psychological torment. Now that you understand the true nature of this architectural masterpiece of misery, the chilling, deliberate chaos of its branching paths and deceitful turns, you are better prepared to imagine the horror that awaits its first and most infamous resident. The silence of the newly completed labyrinth, heavy and expectant, is about to be shattered by the bewildered bellows of a creature led into a world with no discernible escape, no solace, and no end to its turns. The labyrinth is finished, a monument to misdirection, a masterpiece of malevolent architecture. It waits in oppressive silence. This silence, however, is not destined to last. You are there, a shadow in the periphery. As the moment arrives to introduce the labyrinth to its sole, long-term resident, how the Minotaur Asterion is brought to this place is a matter of grim speculation. Is the creature now perhaps a formidable adolescent, heavily chained, dragged by sweating, terrified guards along a route known only to Daedalus? Is it drugged, confused, prodded into the yawning darkness of the labyrinth's entrance, or perhaps Daedalus himself? In a final chilling act of service to King Minos before his own complicated departure from Crete, leads the bewildered bullman into the maw of the maze, using his perfect knowledge to navigate a path that will deliver the creature to its heart, only to then seal it behind him. Imagine the scene: a heavy stone door, disguised to blend seamlessly with the rocky outcrop or the palace foundations, groans open, disturbing the dust of ages yet unspent. The Minotaur, a creature of unnatural strength and perhaps a dawning, terrifying awareness, is thrust inside. Maybe it stumbles, its hooves skittering on the unfamiliar stone. Then, with a deep, resonant boom that echoes through the newly constructed corridors, the door grinds shut. The locking mechanism, another of Daedalus's ingenious, cruel designs, thuds decisively into place. A profound finality settles. The labyrinth has its occupant. Now, you shift your perspective, trying to perceive this new, bewildering world through the senses of the Minotaur. What are its first impressions? The air is cool, thick with the scent of freshly cut stone, damp earth, and an underlying sterile emptiness. Light is scarce, perhaps only a faint, diffuse glow filtering down from cleverly hidden light wells high above, or the flickering orange of torches carried by its escorts, quickly receding, leaving it in an unnerving twilight or near total darkness. Its bull's eyes, more accustomed to the open pastures or the confines of whatever previous enclosure held it, struggle to adjust. Echoes are its first companions, its own snorts of confusion, the scrape of its hooves, a bewildered bellow that rebounds from unseen walls, distorted and multiplied, as if the very air is mocking it with a chorus of its own despair. Driven by fear, by anger, by a desperate instinct to escape this sudden, shocking confinement, the Minotaur begins to explore. It charges down the first passage it sees, its powerful shoulders perhaps brushing the stone, only to be met with an unyielding dead end. It turns frustrated and tries another path, then another. Each corridor initially seems to promise an exit, a way out of this oppressive stone trap, but each one deceives. Some twist back on themselves, leading the creature in maddening circles. Others branch into multiple, equally unhelpful options. You can sense its rising panic, the dawning, horrifying realization that this is no simple pen. This is a puzzle, a vast, stone riddle designed to confound. Its formidable strength is useless against this enemy of sheer, unyielding geometry. Its bull-like nature, perhaps ill-suited for the kind of patient, systematic exploration needed for a maze, only adds to its frustration. It might rage, smashing its horns against the unyielding walls, the impact jarring its skull, the stone chipping but not breaking, the labyrinth absorbing its fury with cold indifference. And so begins the Minotaur's daily grind. If daily even has meaning in a place where the sun and stars are unseen, where time is measured only by the growing ache in its limbs and the gnawing emptiness in its belly, the primary activity is endless, fruitless wandering. You see it pacing, a heavy, monotonous tread, wearing shallow grooves into the stone floors of certain oft-repeated sections. It tries new paths, or paths it thinks are new, only to find them leading to familiar disappointments. The subtle genius of Daedalus's design ensures that no true mental map can form, just as it might feel a flicker of recognition, a sense that it has been this way before and might therefore predict what's next. A new, disorienting twist or an identical-looking but different passage shatters the illusion. Its senses are its only guide, but they too are betrayed. The dim light plays tricks on its vision, making shadows writhe like other creatures, or obscuring the true nature of a turn or an alcove. Sounds are a torment, the constant drip, drip, drip of water from some unseen fissure, a maddeningly persistent rhythm, the scuttling of rats or other vermin, unseen in the gloom. Their presence a constant, unnerving rustle, or worse, periods of profound, echoing silence, broken only by its own ragged breathing. A silence that presses in, amplifying its utter isolation. Smells offer little comfort, the ever-present odor of damp stone, its own increasingly rank scent, and perhaps tantalizingly, cruelly, the distant faint aroma of food. Ah, yes, sustenance. This is a grimly practical question the grand myths often glide over. While epic tales focus on the later Athenian tributes, destined to be devoured by the Minotaur, what did it eat on a regular basis to survive before and between these gruesome deliveries? How was it provided? This aspect of its daily existence is rarely detailed by ancient sources, leaving it to our uncomfortable speculation. Were there specific, designated feeding spots within the labyrinth? If so, could the Minotaur reliably find them, or was the search for food part of its daily torment? Another layer of Daedalus's cruel design, you might imagine a simple stone trough, or a particular dead end where portions of raw meat, grain, or perhaps animal carcasses were lowered by unseen hands from above, or pushed through a narrow, specially designed slot in a wall. This feeding point, if it existed, might be the only predictable element in its chaotic world, a grim beacon. Yet, each meal would also be a stark reminder of its dependence, its captivity. Table for one. Sir, you can almost hear a sarcastic, invisible waiter whisper. Today's special is raw despair with a side of existential dread. Enjoy. The psychological toll of such an existence would be immense. Utter loneliness is its constant companion. No interaction, no touch, no voice other than its own distorted echoes. Imagine the initial animal fury gradually giving way to something deeper, a corrosive blend of rage, frustration, and profound, bone-deep despair. Perhaps there were still bursts of violent rage, charges at unyielding walls, bellows of defiance that ultimately faded into whimpers of desolation. What does a creature, part man with human-like capacity for thought and emotion, part bull with animal instincts, do when stripped of all purpose, all freedom, all social contact? Does its mind begin to fracture? Historians still argue whether the ancient portrayal of the Minotaur was consistently that of a purely savage beast, or if some narratives or artistic depictions hinted at a more tragic, tormented figure, a victim of divine wrath and human cruelty as much as a monster. The labyrinth becomes its entire universe. Its cold stone walls are the only horizons it knows. Its winding, senseless passages are the only paths it can tread. Does it ever, in some deep light well, catch a fleeting glimpse of the moon, a distant star, a patch of blue sky, only to have it snatched away as it moves deeper into the maze? Or is it condemned to an eternity of subterranean gloom? The bad floor plan of Daedalus is not just a container. It's an active agent in shaping the Minotaur's entire, miserable existence. Over the long, uncounted cycles of darkness and dim light, Perhaps the Minotaur develops strange routines, a quirky, almost poignant thought. Some studies in animal behavior demonstrate that even in highly confusing environments, animals can sometimes develop specific habitual routes or maps of limited areas. Maybe the Minotaur, in its endless wanderings, carves out tiny territories of perceived familiarity within the overwhelming chaos. A particular sequence of turns it favors, a dead end where the acoustics are slightly different, a corner where a specific type of moss grows. These wouldn't lead to escape, but they might offer the faintest illusion of order, tiny anchors in an ocean of confusion. You could almost imagine it having a favorite dead end, a place it returns to, not out of hope, but out of a grim, learned habit. Yes, and wall number 37B. Old Reliable. From the inside, Daedalus's architectural choices are a constant, grinding torture. Those identical corridors, the lack of distinguishing features, the endless loops, they are not abstract design flaws, but the very bars of its psychological cage. This place wouldn't get a single star on Ancient Lair Advisor. Great security, absolutely zero curb appeal, and the navigation system is a nightmare. Host is, shall we say, rather hands-off. The sounds of its life within, the roars of anger, the bellows of frustration, the heavy thud of its body collapsing in exhaustion, do these ever filter out, faint and terrifying, to the world beyond the labyrinth's walls? They would only add to the dread and mystery surrounding Minos' monstrous secret, a chilling reminder of the creature's suffering within its perfectly designed, perfectly terrible home. Years bleed into an indistinguishable gray river of time within the stone heart of the labyrinth. The Minotaur, Asterion, no longer a bewildered newcomer, has grown into the full, terrifying might of his monstrous form. His existence is a grim symphony of frustrated roars that echo through the indifferent corridors. The scrape of hooves on stone worn smooth by endless, agitated pacing, and the deep, shuddering sighs of a creature for whom hope is just a forgotten word from a world it barely knew. Daedalus's masterpiece of malice is now thoroughly lived in, if you can call such a tormented existence living. Its passages are marked by the Minotaur's scent, by the subtle signs of its passage, perhaps even by crude, angry gashes gouged into the walls by its powerful horns during fits of rage. Beyond these stone confines, the whispers have grown into chilling legends. King Minos' secret is safe, in a manner of speaking, but the horror it contains is a palpable presence, a dark shadow over Crete. The catalyst for the next, even more tragic chapter in the Labyrinth story, however, originates not in Crete, but in Athens. You find yourself now in that vibrant, intellectually buzzing city, a stark contrast to the grim silence of the Minotaur's prison. King Minos has a son, Androgeos, a young man gifted in athletics and intellect. He travels to Athens to participate in the prestigious Panathenaic Games. These games, a major fixture in the ancient Athenian calendar, were a grand festival of athletic competitions, musical contests, and religious ceremonies held in honor of the city's patron goddess, Athena, drawing talent and spectators from all across the Greek world. Androgeos, it turns out, is a superstar. He sweeps the board, winning victory after victory, his skill and strength outshining all Athenian contenders. This stunning success, unfortunately, stirs a bitter brew of jealousy and resentment. The exact details of Androgeos' demise are shrouded in the mists of conflicting accounts. Some say he was treacherously murdered by his defeated and humiliated Athenian rivals. Others claim that Aegeus, the aging king of Athens, consumed by envy or perhaps fearing the young Cretan's prowess, deliberately sent Androgeos on a suicidal mission against the formidable Marathonian bull, a monstrous bull that was terrorizing the Attic countryside. The irony here is thick, as some traditions suggest this Marathonian bull was none other than the original divine white bull, Pasiphae's paramour, eventually captured by Heracles and later brought to Marathon. Oh, the tangled webs these myths weave. A third version suggests Androgeus was ambushed and killed on his way to Thebes, where he intended to compete in other games. Regardless of the specifics, the outcome is the same. Minos' beloved son is dead, and Athens is held responsible. When the news reaches King Minos in Knossos, his grief is immense, quickly hardening into a cold, unyielding fury. You see him, his face a mask of royal rage, vowing vengeance upon Athens. Crete, with its mighty thalassocracy, its unparalleled naval power, is more than capable of making Athens pay dearly. Minos launches a punitive war. His fleets blockade Athenian ports. His soldiers raid the Attic coast. The gods, perhaps sympathetic to Minos' loss or displeased with Athenian actions, seem to side with Crete. Plague and famine ravage the besieged city of Athens, desperate and starving. King Aegeus consults the oracle at Delphi, as one often did when faced with divinely backed catastrophe. The oracle's pronouncement is bleak. Athens must find a way to appease King Minos. Aegeus sends envoys to Crete to sue for peace. Minos, still consumed by grief and a desire for retribution that goes beyond mere political subjugation, lays down his grim terms. Every 9 years, some versions of the myth say annually, which is even more horrifying to contemplate. Athens must select 7 of its finest youths and 7 of its most virtuous maidens. These 14 young Athenians are to be sent to Crete, unarmed and undefended. Their fate to be cast into the Labyrinth, an offering to the Minotaur, a living sacrifice to appease the spirit of Androgeus and the wrath of his father. Think of it as a cultural exchange program. You can almost hear a grim Cretan diplomat explaining, "Except our side of the exchange is a bull-headed monster, and your participants don't, strictly speaking, return." The horror of this tribute settles upon Athens like a suffocating shroud. Imagine the terror that grips the city each time the tribute cycle approaches. The selection process, often described as being by lot, is a macabre lottery. Families pray to the gods that their sons and daughters will be spared, but for 14 households, the worst imaginable news arrives. The chosen youths and maidens, often from noble families, are plucked from their lives, their futures extinguished. You feel the raw grief of their parents, the despair of the young victims themselves, facing a death almost too horrific to contemplate. Their journey to Crete is one of profound dread. They are put aboard a ship with black sails, a universally recognized symbol of mourning and doom. You are on that ship, a silent witness to their quiet terror, the salt spray cold on your face, the chilling wind seeming to whisper of the monster that awaits. The creak of the timbers, the mournful cry of gulls, the vast, indifferent expanse of the sea, all become elements of their funeral procession. Upon arrival in Knossos, they might be paraded through the streets, a public display of Minos' power and Athens' humiliation, before being led to the hidden entrance of the Laster design labyrinth. And here, these young Athenians become the labyrinth's most tragic users, its unwilling beta testers. Daedalus's meticulously crafted architecture of confusion, designed to torment the Minotaur, now finds fresh subjects. They are not merely food for the beast, they are active participants in its deadly game, their terror a testament to the floor plan's cruel efficacy. Unlike the Minotaur, who has had years to develop whatever grim accommodation it can with its stone prison, these youths are thrust into the bewildering darkness with fresh senses, making the disorientation even more acute, the fear more paralyzing. Historians still argue whether this Athenian tribute was a purely mythical invention, a symbolic narrative element, or if it perhaps reflected some distorted, half-forgotten folk memory of actual Bronze Age power dynamics. Perhaps a time when Minoan Crete exerted dominance over mainland Greek settlements and exacted some form of tribute. You can only imagine their ordeal. The echoing roars of the Minotaur, magnified and distorted by the labyrinth's acoustics, hunting them through the darkness. Their own panicked cries, swallowed by the stone. The identical passages that mock their attempts to find safety, the dead ends that deliver them only to despair. All the ingenious, disorienting features you've already considered, the lack of light, the confusing turns, the oppressive atmosphere, are now instruments of their final, terrifying hours. The air is thick with the metallic scent of their fear, perhaps the faint old tang of blood from previous tributes, and the pervasive, bestial odor of the Minotaur's unseen lair. The psychological torment is as potent as any physical threat, the crushing loss of hope. The terror of the unseen hunter, the absolute certainty of their inescapable and gruesome fate. Definitely not the Cretan holiday package they were sold in the brochure. You think? The grim humor a weak defense against the scene's horror. From King Minos' perspective, however, the Labyrinth is a resounding success. It flawlessly contains the monstrous symbol of his shame, and it serves as a brutally effective instrument of political vengeance, a constant reminder to Athens of its subjugation. The bad floor plan is thus achieving its political objectives through its architectural ones, its disorienting design ensuring no victim ever returns to tell the tale, thereby perpetuating the terror. Is it possible, you wonder, that any of these tributes ever came close to outsmarting the Labyrinth? Even for a short while the mainstream myths focus on the inevitability of their doom, it's a quirky, if somber, thought to entertain some lesser-known local Attic traditions or even much later fictional retellings might have toyed with the idea of brief moments of resistance or near escapes by particularly cunning or resourceful youths before they inevitably succumbed. Such tales, however apocryphal, would only serve to underscore the Labyrinth's ultimate deadliness. It's like playing a video game where the level design itself is the ultimate boss, and it's programmed to ensure you can never truly win, only delay the inevitable game over. Each time the tribute ship, with its funereal black sails, departs from Crete if it is allowed to return at all, it leaves behind 14 young lives extinguished in the darkness. It carries back to Athens only the chilling silence of their fate, renewing the cycle of grief, resentment, and helpless subjugation. This recurring horror, this bleeding wound in the Athenian psyche, is what will eventually set the stage for a hero to arise. Someone daring enough to challenge not just the Minotaur, but the very labyrinth that protects it. The black sails of despair are a constant mournful presence on the horizon, waiting for a change in the wind. The black-sailed ship has become a recurring harbinger of sorrow for Athens. Years have now passed under the oppressive weight of King Minos' tribute. Each 9th year, or perhaps in some more brutal tellings, each single year the city is forced to relive the horror of selecting 14 of its children to be sacrificed to the beast in Crete's architectural nightmare. The Labyrinth. The name itself is a chilling whisper on Athenian lips, synonymous with inescapable doom. King Aegeus, old and frail, is bowed not just by age but by the heavy cloak of his city's grief and his own lingering guilt over the death of Androgeos. The event that precipitated this dreadful bargain. The mood in Athens is one of resigned despair, a city holding its breath, waiting for the next terrible reaping. But a new figure is about to step onto this stage of sorrow and subjugation. You now turn your gaze to a young man, radiating a vibrant energy that seems utterly out of place in the grief-stricken city. This is Theseus. His lineage itself is a subject of heroic whispers. He is known as the son of King Aegeus. Yet some tales claim his true father is none other than Poseidon, the god of the sea, the very same deity whose initial gift of a white bull and subsequent fury led to the Minotaur's creation. If Poseidon is indeed his father, his impending journey to Crete to face Minos' bull-headed shame takes on an even deeper, more resonant irony. His mother is Aethra, a princess of Troezen, who raised him in his early years away from Athens. Theseus is no untested youth. He has already blazed a trail of heroism on his overland journey from Troezen to claim his birthright in Athens. Instead of taking the safe sea route, he chose the perilous coastal path, a road infested with bandits and monstrous challenges, deliberately seeking them out. You recall his legendary encounters Periphetes, the club-bearer, whose own bronze club Theseus claimed, Sinis, the pine bender, who tied his victims to duty-bent pine trees and then released them, Siren, who kicked travelers off a cliff to be devoured by a giant sea turtle, until Theseus gave him a taste of his own medicine. Cercyon, the formidable wrestler of Eleusis, whom Theseus outmatched, and, perhaps most famously, Procrustes, the innkeeper with the iron bed, who would stretch or amputate his guests to make them fit its dimensions. Theseus ensured Procrustes himself fit perfectly. These labors of Theseus, as they became known, established him as a great civilizing hero, a protector of the innocent, akin to Heracles. This mainstream historical fact, or rather, foundational myth, paints him as a figure of immense strength, cunning, and a deep-seated desire for justice. Upon his arrival in Athens, his heroic deeds preceding him, he is eventually recognized by King Aegeus. This recognition is not always straightforward. In some versions, the sorceress Medea, then Aegeus's consort, sees Theseus as a threat to her own son's claim to the throne and plots to poison him. A scheme Aegeus foils at the last moment when he recognizes the sword Theseus carries as his own. It is into this Athens, an Athens that now knows it has a hero in its midst, that the news arrives the time for the third tribute to Crete is drawing near. The city plunges back into its customary despair, but Theseus, young, bold, and filled with a hero's righteous indignation, is appalled. He cannot stand by and watch another generation of Athenian youth be sacrificed. To the shock and dismay of Aegeus, and the astonishment of the Athenian people, Theseus volunteers to be one of the 7 youths. He will go to Crete, not as a victim, but as a challenger. His plan is audacious: to enter the Labyrinth, to slay the Minotaur, and to end the horrific tribute once and for all, restoring Athens' dignity. Aegeus, though heartbroken at the thought of losing his newfound son to such a terrible fate, perhaps also feels a surge of pride at his courage. As Theseus prepares to board the black-sailed ship alongside the other tearful tributes, he makes a solemn promise to his aging father. "If I succeed," he vows, "if I return victorious, we will replace these black sails of mourning with white sails of joy. Watch for our return, and the color of our sails will tell you of our fate before we even reach the shore." This detail, this promise of the white sail, hangs in the air, laden with a significance that will only become clear upon the hero's return journey. You are on that ship once more, but the atmosphere is subtly different this time. Yes, there is still fear, the quiet sobbing of the other youths and maidens chosen for this grim voyage. But emanating from Theseus, there's a palpable aura of determination, a steely resolve that offers a tiny, flickering spark of hope in the overwhelming darkness. He is not just a sheep going to slaughter, he is a warrior, an adventurer, heading into the belly of the beast with a plan. Upon arrival in Crete, the Athenian tributes are, as before, paraded before King Minos. You observe the confrontation. Minos, perhaps older now, his face etched with years of power and the satisfaction of vengeance, looks down upon this new batch of Athenian sacrifices. Does he see in Theseus just another arrogant youth destined for the Minotaur's gullet? Or does something in the young hero's steady gaze, his proud bearing, give Minos a moment's pause? Perhaps there's a tense exchange of words, a silent clash of wills between the aging king who commands the labyrinth and the young hero who intends to defy it. Historians still argue whether the character of King Minos in Greek mythology represents a single, identifiable historical ruler from Crete's Bronze Age glory, an amalgamation of several kings, or if he is an entirely legendary figure, a symbolic representation of ancient Minoan sea power and its complex relationship with mainland Greece. Theseus, ever observant, would already be gathering information, taking the measure of his enemy and the challenge ahead. He would hear the terrified whispers about the labyrinth, the tales of its inescapable corridors, its bewildering darkness, and the monstrous creature at its heart. He understands that his fight is not just with the Minotaur, but with Daedalus's architectural malevolence. That infamous bad floor plan. He is, in essence, planning to be the ultimate alpha tester for this deadly system, determined to find the critical flaw, the exploit that will allow him to navigate the architectural mess and survive. Theseus must have been thinking, right, time to find the main console and reboot this whole Labyrinth program, or at least find the off switch for the angry bullman. You muse. Does he have divine aid? The myths are somewhat ambiguous here. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, will soon play a role through her influence on Ariadne, but as for direct divine intervention for Theseus himself, it's often his own innate heroism, his strength, cunning, and bravery, perhaps subtly blessed by his alleged father Poseidon, that takes center stage. He's not waiting for a miracle. He's come to make one. You might wonder if Theseus did any homework before embarking on this perilous quest. Did he consult with sages? Or perhaps even with disgraced Athenian architects who might have had some theoretical knowledge of complex constructions or maze-like designs? While the classic myths tend to emphasize his raw courage and the later crucial assistance from Ariadne, it's a quirky, interesting thought that a hero known for his intelligence as well as his strength might have sought out any scrap of information. Of course. Ancient Mazes for Dummies probably wasn't a bestseller back then, and it's unlikely he found any YouTube tutorials titled Slay Your Minotaur and Navigate Impossible Labyrinths, Easy 3-Step Guide. He was relying on his wits, his proven track record against monsters and villains, and a healthy dose of heroic audacity. The weight of Athens' hope now rests on his young shoulders. The gods may be watching, fortunes may shift, but Theseus has made his choice. He is here to challenge the unchallengeable, to navigate the unnavigable, to slay the unslayable. The Labyrinth, that monument to confusion and despair, awaits its most determined user yet. Its corridors, designed to break minds and consume lives, are about to meet a will as strong as their ancient stones. The architectural mess is about to get a visitor who intends to clean house. The air in the Cretan dungeons is thick with the metallic scent of fear and the damp chill of ancient stone. You observe the chosen Athenian tributes, huddled together, their young faces etched with a despair that seems to age them beyond their years. Among them, Theseus stands apart. He is resolute, his gaze fixed on some inner point of determination. Yet even he must feel the crushing weight of expectation and the terrifying reputation of the labyrinth that awaits them. Likely on the morrow, he has faced monsters and villains before, but this is different. This is a challenge against an architectural entity designed by a genius to be the ultimate prison, a place that devours not just bodies, but hope itself. But as twilight casts long, somber shadows through the barred windows, an unexpected flicker of hope arrives in a most unlikely form. You see her, a figure moving with a quiet grace through the palace corridors, her features illuminated by the occasional torchlight. This is Ariadne, Princess of Crete, daughter of the formidable King Minos and the unfortunate Queen Pasiphae. She is, therefore, half-sister to the Minotaur, a chilling connection that must cast a strange shadow over her own existence within the palace walls. She lives in the gilded cage of royalty, yet it's a cage tainted by her family's dark secret, her father's brooding tyranny, and the recurring horror of the Athenian tribute. Perhaps she saw Theseus when the tributes were first paraded before her father, his defiant spirit and noble bearing cutting through the miasma of fear, or maybe driven by a force she herself doesn't fully understand. She seeks him out in the gloom of his prison cell. Why does she, a princess of the realm whose son her father is about to feed to a monster, risk everything to help this enemy hero? The ancient poets often attribute it to the swift, irresistible intervention of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who, perhaps favoring Theseus or simply enjoying a bit of divine meddling, pierces Ariadne's heart with an arrow of overwhelming passion for the handsome Athenian. Yet other motivations might swirl within her. Could it be a weary compassion? A desire to finally end the bloody cycle of sacrifice that stains her family's name? Or a spark of rebellion against her stern father and the oppressive atmosphere of Knossos? Perhaps even a pragmatic desire to escape Crete, to find a new life away from the monstrous secret in the labyrinth and the grim court it oversees. Historians still argue whether Ariadne's motivation was primarily a sudden, divinely compelled romantic love, a calculated political move to ally with a rising hero, or a genuine act of conscience. Whatever her reasons, Ariadne orchestrates a secret meeting. You can imagine the scene, the hushed whispers in a secluded corner of the dungeons, the air taut with the risk of discovery. If one of Minos' guards were to find her, the princess consorting with a doomed Athenian tribute, the consequences would be dire. She looks at Theseus, and perhaps for the first time in a long while, he sees not fear or pity, but a lifeline. She declares her intention to help him, her voice urgent, her eyes shining with a mixture of infatuation and resolve. Theseus, ever the pragmatic hero, listens intently. He's not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, especially when that horse might be offering him a way out of becoming literal horse food. And then she reveals her plan, her clever hack. It's not a magical incantation, not a secret map for what map could truly chart Daedalus's deliberate chaos, nor is it a superweapon to vanquish the Minotaur. Instead, Ariadne offers Theseus something astonishingly simple, almost comically low-tech, given the monumental scale of the problem: a ball of linen thread, or a clue as it was then known. Her instructions are straightforward upon entering the labyrinth. Theseus must tie one end of the thread securely to the doorpost or some prominent feature at the entrance. Then, as he ventures deeper into the bewildering maze, he is to let the thread unroll behind him, maintaining a constant physical connection to his starting point. After he confronts and hopefully defeats the Minotaur in the labyrinth's depths, he need only turn and follow that slender thread back through the darkness, through all the confusing turns and dead ends, directly to the entrance and to freedom. This, you realize, is the ingenious, surprisingly mundane exploit for Daedalus's complex design. In a world of roaring monsters, divine interventions, and architectural wonders built to confound the senses, a simple ball of string emerges as the key to salvation. It's like showing up to a complex cybersecurity conference, you think. And the grand solution to bypass the world's most advanced firewall is just remembering to write down the admin password on a sticky note? Now, how did Ariadne conceive of such a brilliantly simple solution? The most common versions of the myth suggest it was her own idea, perhaps divinely inspired by a sympathetic goddess. However, a quirky and less common fringe theory, or perhaps a scholarly embellishment found in some interpretations, suggests that Ariadne might have sought advice from the labyrinth's own creator, Daedalus. Imagine if Daedalus, still in Crete at this time according to some timelines, perhaps feeling a twinge of remorse for the suffering his creation was enabling, or maybe just impressed by Ariadne's plight or Theseus's bravery, gave her this crucial piece of advice. It adds another fascinating layer to Daedalus's already morally ambiguous character, the master architect providing the undo command for his own masterpiece. Along with the vital clue of thread, Ariadne also provides Theseus with a sword. The thread is to conquer the labyrinth. The sword is to conquer its inhabitant. One without the other would be useless. He needs to find the Minotaur, and then he needs to be able to defeat it. But Ariadne's assistance comes with a condition, a bargain struck in the shadows. If Theseus emerges victorious, if he uses her gifts to slay her half-brother and escape the maze, he must take her with him when he leaves Crete. He must marry her and make her his queen in Athens. Theseus, facing almost certain death and now offered a chance at life. Victory, and the hand of a beautiful princess, readily agrees. Promises made in desperate situations are often fervent, even if, as future events will show, not always kept. The beauty of Ariadne's solution lies in its elegant simplicity, juxtaposed against the labyrinth's overwhelming, deliberate complexity. Daedalus poured his genius into creating a system of total spatial disorientation, a place where every architectural element was designed to make you lose your bearings, to erase any sense of direction or return. The thread, however, creates a constant, undeniable physical link to the point of origin. It doesn't matter how many identical corridors you traverse, how many dead ends trick your senses, or how many times the path loops back on itself. As long as that thread remains unbroken, you have a guaranteed way back. It bypasses the psychological torment, rendering the labyrinth's most potent weapon utterly inert. All that sophisticated design, all those carefully crafted illusions. You chuckle softly, and it's all undone by what is essentially the ancient Greek equivalent of a very long piece of dental floss. You witness the moment Ariadne secretly presses the clue of thread and the hilt of the sword into Theseus's hands. These simple objects suddenly feel immensely heavy with the fate of Athens, the life of a hero, and the desperate hope of a princess. The risk she has taken is enormous. If King Minos were to discover her betrayal, his rage would be legendary and terrible. Daedalus, for all his brilliance, likely never envisioned such a straightforward counter to his intricate design. Or perhaps in some deeply buried part of his architect's soul, he understood that every complex system has a potential point of failure. A simple oversight. And here it is, a humble ball of thread. It's a fascinating testament to how often the most elaborate schemes can be unraveled by an unexpectedly simple, direct approach. In fact, the very word clue that we use today in English, meaning a piece of evidence or a vital hint that helps solve a mystery, derives directly from that Old English word clue, meaning a ball of thread. Precisely because of this myth and Ariadne's ingenious labyrinth solution, this linguistic legacy is a mainstream historical fact, a quiet acknowledgement of the power of her simple hack that has echoed down through centuries. Theseus is now armed, not just with a weapon, but with the key to the labyrinth's undoing. The other Athenian tributes, perhaps sensing a shift, look towards him with a new mixture of fear and dawning, almost incredulous. Awe. The grim moment of entry into Daedalus's architectural nightmare is fast approaching, but for the first time, there's a strategy. There's a chance. The dreadful moment has arrived. Under a sky perhaps bruised with the colors of an unwilling dawn, or within the torchlit gloom of a subterranean holding area, the heavy stone door to the labyrinth creaks open. It's an opening that yawns like the maw of some great, sleeping beast, promising nothing but darkness and despair. You are there with Theseus as he stands at the threshold. Perhaps he exchanges a final, charged glance with Ariadne, her face pale but resolute in the flickering light, before he turns to face the abyss. The other Athenian tributes, 13 young souls, tremble behind him, their eyes wide with a primal terror. For them, this is the end. For Theseus, it is the ultimate challenge. With Ariadne's precious clue of thread clutched in one hand and her sword perhaps concealed beneath his tunic or strapped to his side, he takes a deep breath. He carefully, deliberately, ties one end of the linen thread to a heavy iron ring set beside the doorway, or perhaps to a projecting stone that looks sturdy enough to hold. He gives it a tug. Secure? Then, with a silent prayer to any gods who might still be listening, perhaps to his alleged father, Poseidon, he steps across the threshold, plunging into the oppressive darkness. The other tributes follow, shadows clinging to his desperate resolve. Whether a door booms shut behind them, sealing them in, or they simply pass a point in a winding passage where the outside world is lost forever, the effect is the same. They are now fully within Daedalus's domain. Instantly, the labyrinth begins its work on your senses. The darkness is the first assault. It's not just the absence of light, it's a thick, almost tangible presence that presses in from all sides. Your eyes, like Theseus's, strain to adjust, but find little purchase. Perhaps faint, unreliable glimmers filter down from high, unseen openings far above, just enough to create confusing shadows and suggest shapes that aren't really there. The precious thread Ariadne provided is a pale, ghostly line in the gloom, a fragile connection to the lost world of light. Then there are the sounds, or the unnerving lack of them. Theseus's own footsteps, though he tries to move with stealth, seem to echo unnaturally in some sections, while in others the stone seems to swallow all noise, creating an eerie, tomb-like silence. You hear the soft, almost rhythmic rustle of the thread unspooling, a counterpoint to the ragged, fearful breathing of the other tributes. Their occasional stifled sobs or whimpers are sharp, pathetic sounds in the vast, uncaring emptiness. And beneath it all, a profound, ancient silence of stone, holding its secrets close. The air itself is an assault. It's stale, heavy, with the cloying scent of damp earth, ancient dust, and something else. A faint, disturbing metallic tang you try not to identify, overlaying the pervasive, cold smell of unyielding stone. And beneath it all, the unmistakable, pungent aroma of fear, emanating from his companions, and perhaps even a trace from Theseus himself. Though he masters it with iron will, your hand, like his, might reach out to touch the walls for guidance. Cold, unyielding, sometimes rough-hewn, sometimes unnervingly smooth. The floor is uneven, scattered with loose pebbles or dipping unexpectedly, forcing constant vigilance. The thread, that slender cord, becomes an almost sacred object, its familiar texture a reassurance in this alien landscape. As Theseus leads the way deeper into the labyrinth, Daedalus's ingenious, cruel design begins to assert its psychological dominance. Corridors stretch on, then turn, only to reveal another passage that looks identical to the last. Was it a left turn, then a right, or two rights already? Even with the thread as a guide for retreat, the sense of forward direction becomes muddled. It feels like Daedalus just hit Ctrl plus C, Ctrl plus V for this whole section. You mutter inwardly. And didn't bother to change the wallpaper. They reach dead ends. For the other tributes, each one is a fresh stab of despair, a confirmation of their hopeless situation. For Theseus, focusing on the thread, it's a momentary frustration, a diversion but not a full stop. He must backtrack, the others stumbling behind him. Their hope, pinned entirely on him, perhaps wavering with each setback. The labyrinth offers false choices, passages branching off, tempting exploration. But Theseus knows he must stick to one path, allowing the thread to mark his tortuous but singular route. Otherwise, its purpose as a guide for retreat would be lost in a web of its own making. This is more than a physical ordeal. It's a relentless mental assault. The oppressive gloom, the unsettling acoustics, the constant uncertainty of what lies around the next bend, and, above all, the chilling knowledge that somewhere within these twisting passages lurks a monstrous predator. The other Athenians are a chorus of barely suppressed panic. Their fear is a heavy weight, and Theseus must not only manage his own but also project an aura of confidence he might not fully feel, lest their terror become infectious and lead to a fatal mistake. Is that a flicker of movement in the deep shadows? Is that distant rumble the Minotaur, or just the settling of ancient stones? The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, is inescapable. You can almost imagine Daedalus setting up little hidden cameras. You jest grimly to yourself, broadcasting Labyrinth's most terrifying moments to a very select Cretan audience. The thread is everything. It is their lifeline, their Ariadne's grace made tangible. Theseus likely checks it constantly, ensuring it hasn't snagged on a sharp rock, that it's still securely anchored at its origin. The thought of that slender cord breaking is a horror almost equal to encountering the Minotaur unprepared. It's the labyrinth's primary psychological weapon, the erasure of hope through irretrievable lostness, that the thread so elegantly neutralizes. Hours crawl by, measured not by any timepiece, but by the growing ache in their limbs, the dryness in their throats, the gnawing hunger in their bellies. The initial sharp terror in the other tributes likely numbs into a state of exhausted, stumbling dread. But Theseus presses onward. He is not merely wandering, he is actively searching, using the labyrinth's own confusing network as his hunting ground. He is seeking the core, the dark heart where the Minotaur lairs. Labyrinths and mazes in many ancient cultures, a recognized historical fact, often possessed symbolic centers. These could be sacred spots, goals of a pilgrimage, or places of concentrated power. Theseus seeks the labyrinth's negative center, the den of the beast. As they venture deeper, subtle signs of the Minotaur begin to appear. The air grows ranker, heavy with a bestial odor. Stones might be scuffed or disturbed in a way that suggests the passage of something large and powerful. Perhaps a distant guttural sound, a snort or a bellow, momentarily freezes them in their tracks. Or, more chillingly, they might stumble upon a grim tableau, the scattered bones or tattered remnants of clothing from a previous tribute. A stark reminder of what awaits if they fail. You feel a cold dread, imagining such a discovery in the oppressive darkness. It's a quirky, if unsettling, thought that Daedalus might have incorporated specific acoustic features into his design. Some acousticians and archaeologists have explored how ancient enclosed spaces, like caves or certain ritual structures, might have been intentionally designed or chosen for their sound resonating properties. Perhaps to amplify sounds, create eerie echoes, or even generate infrasound to induce feelings of awe, fear, or disorientation in those within. Imagine if the Minotaur's roar, channeled through these ancient corridors, seemed to come from all directions at once, or from nowhere and everywhere. The practical layout of any historical labyrinth at Knossos remains a subject of intense scholarly debate. Scholars continue to examine Minoan architectural remnants, questioning whether any specific area truly matches the mythic labyrinth's description, or if the labyrinth was a metaphor for the bewildering power of the Minoan state itself. Its complex bureaucracy and administration as impenetrable to outsiders as any physical maze. Every feature of Daedalus's bad floor plan is now being experienced in its full, terrifying potency. The lack of natural light, the absence of landmarks, the maddening repetition of architectural elements, the oppressive atmosphere. It's a symphony of disorientation. It's not a passive building, it's an active antagonist, working on their minds and spirits. If this place had a comments book by the entrance, you think? Theseus's review would be scathing. 0 stars, terrible navigation. Resident host is a bit of a brute. Would not recommend. Yet, despite the labyrinth's oppressive power, there's a subtle shift. The signs of the Minotaur are becoming more frequent, more pronounced. The air feels heavier, charged with an unseen presence. The thread has unspooled a very long way, a testament to the distance they've traveled into this stone hell. A growing conviction forms in Theseus's mind they are close. Close to the heart of the maze. Close to the confrontation that will decide everything. The air grows thick, heavy with a primal stench that makes your nostrils flare and your stomach churn. The faint, flickering light from Theseus's torch, or perhaps a distant, unseen light well, does little to dispel the oppressive gloom, but it's enough to confirm what your other senses are screaming they have arrived. This is it, the heart of the labyrinth, the Minotaur's den. The signs are unmistakable now. The air is rank with the creature's acrid scent. The floor is littered with the grim, scattered detritus of past victims shapes you register with a cold lurch, though your mind mercifully shies away from lingering on the details. And there's a palpable aura of ancient violence clinging to the very stones. The other Athenian tributes, men who have clung to Theseus like frightened shadows, are now practically paralyzed with terror, their whimpers stifled into choked gasps. You feel their fear, a cold wave washing over you. The slender thread, Ariadne's gift, still unspools faithfully behind Theseus. a fragile testament to the long, bewildering journey they've undertaken to reach this dreadful place. This central chamber, if you can even call it that, is no grand throne room of evil. It's just a slightly wider confluence of oppressive passages, perhaps a natural cavern that Daedalus incorporated into his design, or simply a space where several corridors meet, creating an area of greater dimensions but no greater comfort. The ceiling is still lost in impenetrable shadow overhead. The walls are still cold, damp, and unforgiving. It's the very epicenter of Daedalus's bad floor plan, a disorienting, poorly lit space designed not for living, even for a monster, but merely as a slightly less constricted node within the greater, bewildering network. And then you see him, or rather, you sense him first, a vast, unmoving shadow in the deepest recess of the chamber, a patch of darkness denser than the rest. Then a low, guttural rumble, like distant thunder, or the growl of a cornered beast. The Minotaur? Slowly. He emerges, or perhaps he was always there, watching, waiting with a terrifying stillness. His immense form seems to suck all remaining light from the space. The bull's head, with its fearsome horns, swings slowly from side to side, nostrils flaring as it catches their scent. The human-like torso beneath is a nightmare landscape of corded muscle and coarse hair. His eyes, accustomed to this perpetual twilight, gleam with a malevolent red light. He has been disturbed. His sanctuary has been violated. A deafening roar. A terrifying fusion of enraged bull and something hideously human erupts from his throat, blasting through the chamber and echoing down the labyrinthine corridors they just traversed. This is the moment. All the fear, all the anticipation coalesces into this one desperate confrontation. Theseus, his face a mask of grim determination, pushes the terrified tributes further behind him and steps forward. The sword Ariadne gave him, a sliver of polished bronze or perhaps even magically hardened steel, feels small against the sheer bulk of the creature before him. But it's all he has. The fight is not a scene of heroic, choreographed ballet. It's a brutal, ugly, desperate struggle in the cramped, treacherous half-light. The Minotaur charges, head down, horns aimed to gore and pulverize. Its strength is prodigious, its rage a physical force. Theseus, relying on his hard-won agility from his previous adventures and a warrior's instinct, dodges the initial onslaught. The Minotaur's horn perhaps scraping sparks from the stone wall where he stood moments before. The air is filled with the creature's bellowing. Theseus's sharp cries of exertion, the clash of sword against thick hide or bone, the sickening thud of impact, and the terrified gasps of the onlookers. Representations of Theseus battling the Minotaur are a staple of ancient Greek art, found on countless vases, reliefs, and sculptures. These depictions often showcase a dynamic, life-or-death struggle, with the hero's victory being a testament to courage and skill over brute force, a core theme in Greek heroic mythology. Daedalus's poorly planned architecture, intended to confuse and contain, now becomes an unwilling arena for this life-or-death duel. The limited space gives the Minotaur an advantage in some ways, its bulk filling the narrow passages, but it also hinders its charges. Theseus uses the labyrinth's own confusing layout to his advantage, darting behind a projecting spur of rock or into the mouth of an adjoining corridor, forcing the enraged beast to follow, perhaps to become momentarily wedged or to expose a flank. The uncertain footing, the deceptive shadows, the disorienting echoes, all the elements designed to break the spirit of those who wandered within are now chaotic variables in this deadly dance. Looks like Daedalus's user-hostile features are now providing some unexpected tactical advantages for the user. Provided the user is a demigod hero, you observe with a touch of grim irony. The Minotaur, for all its strength, is a creature of rage and instinct. Theseus, though outmatched in brute power, fights with intelligence and unwavering courage. He feints, he dodges, he seeks an opening, the sword a flickering extension of his will. Perhaps the beast, in its fury, overextends. Perhaps Theseus, guided by a hero's luck or a whisper from a helpful deity, sees his chance. With a desperate lunge, he drives the sword deep into the Minotaur's vital spot. The throat, the heart. The myth varies on the detail. A different kind of roar tears from the Minotaur now, one of shock, of pain, of disbelief. It stumbles, its immense body wavering, its bullhead, moments before a symbol of terrifying power, now seems to droop, with a final, shuddering groan. The creature, Asterion, the starry one, son of Pasiphae and the divine white bull, crashes to the stone floor of its prison. A tremor runs through the labyrinth, or perhaps it's just the impact of such a colossal fall. Then, a silence descends, a silence so profound, so absolute, it's almost as deafening as the preceding roars. The only sound is Theseus's harsh, ragged breathing and the soft, incredulous whimpers of the rescued Athenians. He stands over his fallen foe, exhausted, bloodied, but victorious. The beast that haunted Athens' nightmares, the shame of Crete, the sorrow of King Minos, lies still. But this is only half the battle. He has conquered the Minotaur. Now, he must once again conquer Daedalus's labyrinth, this time leading 13 traumatized souls back to the light. The nature of the Minotaur itself, whether it was intended to be seen as a symbol of pure animalistic savagery. The dark, suppressed side of human nature, a coded representation of foreign tyranny Crete over Athens, or perhaps even a tragic figure born of a divine curse, is a topic scholars continue to dissect and debate, each interpretation offering a different lens through which to view Theseus's victory. And it's a quirky, almost amusing observation that many Renaissance and later artistic depictions of the labyrinth often portray it with surprisingly well-lit, spacious corridors and almost classical architectural elegance. A far cry from the dark, claustrophobic, terrifying maze described in the ancient texts. These artists, perhaps prioritizing clarity or aesthetic conventions over mythical accuracy, inadvertently gave Daedalus a design credit for some rather lovely, if entirely impractical for its purpose, interiors. Guess they didn't get the memo about the utter confusion part of the design brief. You muse. Even in this moment of triumph, standing in the Minotaur's vanquished lair, the oppressive nature of the labyrinth is undeniable. This central chamber is no hero's hall. It's merely the slightly less awful epicenter of an architectural torment. The bad floor plan made the Minotaur's existence a living hell, and it turned this climactic confrontation into a desperate, dangerous scramble in the dark. Seriously, Daedalus, you think, looking around the grim, poorly lit space, not even a single sconce for dramatic lighting. This place wouldn't get a passing grade in Evil Lair Design 101 for ambiance. But there's no time for architectural critique. Theseus, his breath slowly returning, turns his attention to the next. Equally crucial task. His gaze falls upon the slender, unassuming line of Ariadne's thread, disappearing back into the shadowy passage from which they came. That simple, low-tech marvel, that clever hack, is now their only hope of escaping the enduring clutches of the labyrinth's terrible, bewildering layout. The Minotaur lies slain, a monstrous testament to brute force and divine curse, finally stilled in the oppressive heart of its man-made hell. A heavy silence broken only by Theseus's ragged breathing and the choked sobs of the rescued Athenians fills the poorly lit chamber. The immediate, overwhelming terror has passed, but the labyrinth itself, Daedalus's masterpiece of disorientation, still looms around them, its countless dark passages and mocking dead ends an enduring threat. Theseus, though bone-weary and splattered with the grim evidence of his battle, knows they cannot linger. King Minos would not remain ignorant of such an event for long, and the very stones of this place seem to exude a chilling, soul-wearying aura. His gaze, sharp and focused despite his exhaustion, sweeps the chamber and finds it the slender, unassuming line of Ariadne's thread, disappearing back into the darkness from whence they came. His mission had two parts: slay the beast and escape its prison. Part 1, complete. Part 2, commencing now. Gently, he gathers the other tributes, their initial shock now giving way to a dawning, incredulous joy, though still tinged with the deep-seated fear of the maze. He reminds them of the thread, their sole guide. And so, with Theseus now at the rear, ensuring the thread is carefully rewound or at least followed without error, they begin their journey back. You move with them, retracing their steps through the bewildering darkness. The labyrinth is no less confusing on the return trip. Its identical corridors still stretch endlessly, its light still treacherous and sparse. But now the thread cuts through the psychological power of Daedalus's design. There are no more choices to agonize over, no more dead ends to dash their hopes. Each turn is dictated by the path of the string. It's like having the ultimate cheat sheet for the world's most difficult escape room. The concept of using a thread or other markers to navigate complex or unknown terrains is a practical survival technique, one that appears in various forms in folklore and real-world exploration across cultures. Ariadne's clue is simply the most archetypal and famous example in Western mythology. The journey outwards feels faster, or at least imbued with a sense of purpose that was absent on the terrifying venture inwards. They pass the same looping passages, the same false turns, but these features are now stripped of their menace, reduced to mere architectural quirks on a known route. The other Athenians, just who had been stumbling in near despair, now move with a lighter step, their eyes fixed on the hero guiding them and the miraculous thread he holds. You can almost hear the collective sigh of relief. You imagine, like when your phone finally reconnects to the Wi-Fi after an eternity of no signal. Sweet, sweet connectivity to the outside world. Then, a change in the air. A subtle lightening of the oppressive gloom ahead. A faint, almost forgotten scent of fresh sea breeze. Of living plants. Cutting through the stale, earthy odor of the labyrinth. The sounds of the outside world. Distant, perhaps, but real. They are approaching the entrance. And then, there it is, a rectangle of brighter light. A beacon of hope. With a final surge of effort, Theseus leads them out of the mouth of the labyrinth, back into the Cretan air. The sudden brightness is almost blinding, the fresh air intoxicating. They stumble out, blinking, gasping. A spectral, grimy group, but alive. Alive. And waiting anxiously, perhaps hidden nearby, is Ariadne. Her face, etched with worry, transforms into a radiant smile of overwhelming relief and joy as she sees Theseus emerge, bloodied but triumphant, followed by the dazed but intact Athenian youths and maidens. Her gamble, her dangerous act of love and defiance, has paid off, but there is no time for lengthy celebrations or tender reunions on the Cretan shore. They are still deep in King Minos's territory, and the news of the Minotaur's demise and the escape of the tributes will soon spread like wildfire, bringing the king's wrath down upon them. Their escape from Crete must be swift and secret. Ariadne, her fate now inextricably linked with Theseus, quickly joins the group, under the cover of darkness, or perhaps in the confusion following some diversionary tactic. They make their way to Theseus's ship, the one that bore the black sails of doom to Crete. Some versions of the myth add a touch of cunning ruthlessness to Theseus's escape plan before they depart. He leads a daring raid on the Cretan harbor, drilling holes in the hulls of Minos's ships, effectively crippling the Minoan fleet and preventing any immediate pursuit. With their escape route secured, they quickly set sail, leaving the shores of Crete and the labyrinth with its dead monster behind them. A collective sigh of relief ripples through the ship. For now, they are safe. The sea voyage home is, for a time, an idyll. The rescued Athenians, their terror slowly receding, are filled with an almost hysterical jubilation, forever indebted to their hero, Theseus and Ariadne are together, the promise of their future in Athens presumably shining brightly before them. The only discordant note, though perhaps unnoticed in their relief, is that the ship still bears its ominous black sails. Their journey leads them to make a stop at an island. Most commonly, this is identified as Naxos, sometimes as Dia, which is a small island, visible from the coast of Crete, making it a plausible early stop. The reasons for landing vary to take on fresh water and supplies, to shelter from a storm, or simply to rest. And it is here, on this seemingly tranquil island, that Theseus commits his most shocking and controversial act, a cruel farewell that has puzzled and dismayed audiences for centuries. He abandons Ariadne. The why of this abandonment is a tapestry woven from conflicting threads. Was it Theseus's own cold-hearted decision? Did he, having achieved his goal and secured his escape with her help, now see her as an encumbrance, a political liability, the daughter of his sworn enemy, the half-sister of the beast he slew? Did he dread bringing a Cretan princess? A living reminder of his bloody deed and Crete's shame. To Athens, this interpretation paints Theseus as a callous user, a hero deeply flawed by ingratitude and expediency. Seriously, Theseus, you want to shout across the centuries, ghosting the woman who literally saved your life and the lives of 13 others by leaving her asleep on a random beach. That's a new low, even for a hero with a complicated relationship history. Or was it, as some more sympathetic versions claim, due to divine intervention? One popular account, particularly favored in later art and poetry, is that the god Dionysus Bacchus to the Romans, who had long admired Ariadne from afar, appeared to Theseus perhaps in a dream, or in a direct, awe-inspiring epiphany on Naxos. The god fiercely claims Ariadne as his own destined bride and commands Theseus to leave her. In this scenario, Theseus departs heartbroken but obedient to divine will. Ariadne, after her initial despair, is then found by Dionysus and becomes his beloved consort, often elevated to divine or near-divine status herself. This version somewhat absolves Theseus, turning his abandonment into a pious, if painful, act. Indeed, Ariadne's significant cult on Naxos and her strong mythological association with Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and revelry, are well-attested historical facts from antiquity. This suggests she might have been an important local or even Minoan goddess in her own right, whose story was later woven into the Theseus myth, her abandonment by the hero serving as a narrative bridge to her more significant divine partnership. Other versions whisper that Athena or Hermes appeared to Theseus in a dream, warning him against Ariadne or instructing him to leave her for reasons unclear. Regardless of the precise cause, the result is the same for Ariadne. She awakens on the shore to find herself alone. The sail of Theseus's ship, a rapidly diminishing speck on the horizon, her desolation, her cries of betrayal and grief, are among the most poignant moments in Greek mythology. Scholars continue to debate the reasons behind Ariadne's abandonment on Naxos, with interpretations ranging from Theseus's callousness and political expediency to divine intervention by Dionysus, reflecting differing ancient attitudes towards heroism, romantic obligation, and the fates of powerful female figures in myth. Theseus, whether out of guilt, divine instruction, sheer forgetfulness in the rush of departure, or perhaps still distracted by the events on Naxos, makes another critical error. He forgets his promise to his father, King Aegeus. He forgets to change the black sails of mourning to the white sails of victory. The ship, bearing its hero and the rescued youths, speeds towards Athens, but it flies the colors of doom. This abandonment of Ariadne casts a significant shadow over Theseus's heroic persona. It makes him a more complex, more tragically human figure, capable of great courage and great cruelty, of monumental achievement and monumental insensitivity. He could navigate the labyrinth and slay its beast, but the intricacies of the human heart, or at least his obligations to it, seem to have utterly confounded him. The labyrinth is behind him, Its architectural challenge met and defeated by Ariadne's clever hack. But the repercussions of this cruel farewell and the forgotten promise of the sails are yet to make landfall. While Theseus is making his controversial romantic decisions on Naxos and sailing towards a tragic welcome in Athens, back in Crete, the architect of the Minotaur's misery and eventual demise is about to face his own. You may recall that Theseus, in his haste or distraction, forgot to change the black sails of his ship to white. King Aegeus, anxiously watching from the Athenian Acropolis, sees those dark sails on the horizon, assumes the worst, that his son is dead, and in his overwhelming grief, throws himself from the cliffs into the sea below, the very sea that would thereafter bear his name, the Aegean. So, Theseus returns to Athens a hero who has ended a horrifying tribute, but also as an unintentional parasite, his triumph forever tainted by his father's tragic death. This Athenian drama, however, unfolds while Daedalus, the master craftsman, is still under the patronage, or perhaps increasingly, the scrutiny, of King Minos. The news eventually filters back to King Minos, and it is a torrent of disasters. The Minotaur, his monstrous tool of terror and symbol of Athenian subjugation, is dead. The Athenian tributes, who should have been its latest victims, have escaped. His own daughter, Ariadne, has betrayed him and fled with the enemy hero, Theseus. And to add insult to injury, his precious Cretan fleet may have been sabotaged, left with holes drilled in their hulls, unable to give immediate chase. Minos' fury, you can imagine, is a storm of epic proportions. He has lost a stepson, however problematic, a daughter, his absolute leverage over Athens, and potentially the readiness of his navy. It's a quadruple whammy of humiliation and loss. His rage seeks a target. Theseus is gone, beyond his immediate reach. Ariadne is with him. But who else on Crete could be implicated who possessed the cunning, the knowledge to aid such an escape? To outwit the labyrinth itself, Minos' suspicious gaze inevitably falls upon Daedalus. Remember that quirky little theory that Ariadne might have consulted Daedalus for the secret of the thread? Whether true or not, Daedalus is the labyrinth's creator. He designed it to be inescapable. Its failure to contain Theseus, its bad floor plan being so spectacularly hacked, is a direct reflection on its architect. Furthermore, Minos would recall that it was Daedalus' ingenuity that facilitated Pasiphae's unnatural union with the bull in the first place by constructing that infamous wooden cow. In Minos' mind, Daedalus is now inextricably linked to the beginning of this whole sorry saga, and now, perhaps to its disastrous for Minos end. He knows too many royal secrets. His cleverness, once an asset, now makes him a dangerous liability. And so, in a stroke of deeply ironic justice, King Minos orders the arrest and imprisonment of Daedalus and his young son, Icarus, who had been living with his father in Crete. Daedalus, the master designer of confinement, the architect who crafted the ultimate prison of bewildering complexity to hold another, now finds himself a prisoner. The irony is so thick you could build a smaller, equally depressing labyrinth out of it. However, Minos, perhaps acknowledging Daedalus' intimate knowledge of the labyrinth, or maybe because the labyrinth itself was now considered defiled or simply too dangerous without its guardian, doesn't imprison him in his own creation. That would be like asking the fox to guard the henhouse, even if the fox built the henhouse. Instead, Daedalus and Icarus are typically said to have been imprisoned in a high, isolated tower overlooking the sea, or sometimes in a more conventional, well-guarded prison. Escape by any normal means seems impossible. You are now a silent observer in that cramped stone cell with Daedalus and Icarus. The salt-laced wind whistles through the narrow window slits. The rhythmic crash of waves far below is a constant reminder of their isolation. Daedalus, the man whose mind soared with invention, now paces the confines of his prison. You see the frustration etched on his face, the simmering anger at Minos' injustice? But his inventive spirit? that restless engine of creativity, cannot be truly imprisoned. He watches everything. He notes the flight patterns of the gulls that wheel and cry outside their tower, their effortless mastery of the air. He observes the way the wind catches their feathers, the subtle adjustments of their wings that allow them to soar and dive. His primary concern is for Icarus, his beloved son, trapped here because of his father's complicated relationship with the Cretan king. He must find a way out, not just for himself, but for the boy. And as he watches the birds, day after day, a daring, seemingly impossible idea begins to take shape in his extraordinary mind. If land and sea are barred to them, if Minos controls every port and every path on Crete, then only one avenue of escape remains the sky itself. This spark of an idea will lead to perhaps his most famous invention, one that has captured the human imagination for millennia, a potent symbol of both human aspiration and tragic overreach. The human desire for flight is an ancient one, as you know, reflected in countless myths and legends across many cultures long before the Wright brothers made it a reality. The story of Daedalus and Icarus stands as the preeminent Greek myth exploring this very aspiration. But how does a prisoner locked in a tower acquire the materials for such an audacious undertaking? This is where Daedalus's resourcefulness truly shines. You see him, over weeks and months, patiently, secretly gathering what he needs. Feathers? Perhaps dropped by molting seabirds that perch on the tower's ledges. Collected one by one. Wax? Maybe from small candles provided for light, or from honeycombs if any bees were foolish enough to build nearby. Carefully scraped and hoarded. Thread, painstakingly unraveled from their own worn tunics or other scraps of fabric. It's a slow, meticulous process, requiring immense patience and cunning to avoid the notice of their guards. Daedalus, the grand architect, is now reduced to working with the humblest of found objects, like an ancient MacGyver with a degree in advanced mythological engineering. Pretty sure this wasn't covered in Advanced Prison Break Techniques 101 at the local community college. You chuckle to yourself. He begins the construction. 2 pairs of wings, one for himself, one for Icarus. He lays out a framework, perhaps from light, flexible twigs or reeds he manages to procure or break from some part of their prison's rustic furniture. Then, with the skill of a master craftsman, he sorts the feathers by size, carefully overlapping them like the scales of a fish or the natural arrangement on a bird's wing, from the smallest at the leading edge to the longest at the tips. He binds them together with the precious thread and then secures their quills firmly in place with the carefully melted and applied beeswax. The Labyrinth's bad floor plan was all about inescapable groundedness, about horizontal confusion. These wings are the antithesis of that. They are about vertical escape, about transcending earthly limitations entirely, a complete shift in Daedalus's inventive focus. Scholars often discuss the myth of Daedalus as a profound exploration of the ambiguous nature of human ingenuity, its incredible capacity for creating wonders, for solving problems, for artistic expression, but also its potential for causing harm, leading to tragic destruction, or being turned against its creator. Think of Perdix, his jealousy-fueled murder of his talented nephew, the Labyrinth, a marvel of engineering but a tool of despair, and soon, Icarus's fateful flight. Daedalus's own imprisonment is a direct consequence of his cleverness being perceived as a threat. And while the mechanics of how these wax and feather wings were supposed to actually enable human flight are, of course, purely fantastical, it's a quirky and interesting tidbit that ancient artistic depictions of Daedalus and Icarus on vases or reliefs sometimes show surprising attention to details like feather arrangement or rudimentary harnesses. This suggests a close observation of birds by these ancient artists, even if the depicted aerodynamics would make any modern aeronautical engineer weep or laugh. You definitely wouldn't get your pilot's license with those things today, you think? But they get top marks for ambition and sheer mythic style. It's a poignant irony, Daedalus, who designed the Labyrinth, A trap so complex it was meant to defeat the mind through endless, bewildering choice, is now confined by a simple tower, a structure of straightforward physical restraint offering no choices at all. His solution this time is not to navigate the existing prison or find a flaw in its design, but to bypass it entirely, to escape into a new, untamed dimension. If you can't go through the walls or the door, his actions seem to say, then you simply go over them. The wings are finally ready. Two magnificent, fragile constructions of feather, wax and hope. Daedalus looks at them, then at his son Icarus, a mixture of pride and trepidation in his eyes. Their most daring escape attempt, their flight into the unknown, is imminent, and with it will come a new set of instructions, a new set of warnings for his eager, perhaps too eager, young son. Before we delve into the dusty, perplexing search for physical evidence of Daedalus's most infamous creation, let's briefly conclude the current dramatic arc for our genius inventor. Having meticulously crafted two pairs of delicate wings from feathers, wax, and thread in his island tower prison, Daedalus prepares for an escape unprecedented in human history, or myth at least. You see him strapping one pair of wings to his son, Icarus. His heart a mixture of hope and trepidation. He gives the boy stern, explicit instructions: fly a middle course, my son. Do not fly too low, lest the dampness from the sea clog your wings. And do not fly too high, lest the sun's heat melt the wax that holds your feathers. Then, with a final, loving glance, Daedalus launches himself into the air, his own wings beating a steady, practiced rhythm. Icarus follows initially with awkward flaps, then with growing confidence, exhilarated by the astonishing sensation of flight. For a time, all goes well. They soar over the Aegean, leaving Crete and King Minos' impotent fury far behind. But Icarus, young and heedless, overcome by the sheer joy and intoxicating freedom of flight, forgets his father's crucial warning. He begins to climb higher, ever higher, drawn by a reckless desire to touch the sun. Daedalus, seeing his son's ascent, calls out in alarm, but his voice is lost in the rush of the wind. The inevitable happens. The sun's fierce rays soften the fragrant beeswax binding Icarus's wings. Feathers begin to detach, fluttering uselessly down towards the sea. Icarus, flapping his arms now bare of their lifting surfaces, plummets like a stone into the waves below, crying out his father's name. Daedalus, circling in helpless anguish, can only watch his son disappear into the churning water. He later recovers Icarus's body and buries him on a nearby island, thereafter named Icaria in his son's memory. The Icarian Sea, that part of the Aegean, also bears the boy's name. Daedalus himself, a broken man, eventually makes his way to Sicily, his genius forever shadowed by this profound personal tragedy, a direct consequence of an escape born from an imprisonment that was, itself, a consequence of the Labyrinth's ultimate failure to contain Theseus. Now, let us reel time forward, centuries, even millennia, from these mythic events. The tale of the Labyrinth, the Minotaur, the brave hero Theseus, and the clever princess Ariadne has echoed down through the ages, its narrative tendrils gripping the human imagination with an enduring tenacity. It's a story of monstrous curses, ingenious architecture, heroic sacrifice, and tragic love. It's got all the ingredients for a timeless epic. And with such a vivid, compelling story comes the inevitable human desire to find its tangible roots, to unearth physical proof that these extraordinary events truly transpired, that somewhere beneath the Cretan soil, the stone corridors of Daedalus's creation still wait. Enter Sir Arthur Evans. In the early years of the 20th century, this British archaeologist, armed with a profound knowledge of classical texts and an almost romantic conviction, began extensive excavations at a large, unassuming hill known as Kephala, near Heraklion in Crete. What he uncovered there, beginning in March of 1900, was nothing short of spectacular. the sprawling, multi-storied remains of a vast Bronze Age palace complex, covering several acres. This, Evans proclaimed with considerable enthusiasm, was the Palace of Minos, the legendary king of Crete. And by extension, if this was Minos' palace, then somewhere within or beneath its bewildering array of rooms, corridors and courtyards must lie the labyrinth itself. This identification is a mainstream historical fact regarding early Minoan archaeology, profoundly shaping both scholarly and popular understanding of the site. You can almost feel Evans's excitement as you wander. In your mind's eye, through the ruins he brought to light. Knossos, as the site became known, is indeed a place of astonishing complexity. Hundreds of rooms, connected by long, winding passages, staircases leading to upper floors now mostly gone, but evidenced by their foundations, and mysterious light wells plunging deep into the structure. Vast storage magazines lined with enormous ceramic jars, or pithoi, capable of holding oil, wine, or grain, attest to a sophisticated administrative and economic hub. Vibrant frescoes depicting scenes of bull leaping, graceful dolphins, elegant courtly figures, and mythical griffins adorned the walls, hinting at a rich and sophisticated culture, the Minoan civilization, as Evans named it. To him, the very layout of the palace, its asymmetrical plan, its myriad chambers, and its disorienting shifts in level, felt like a labyrinth. It seemed entirely plausible that this architectural maze could have inspired, or even been, the labyrinth of myth. Evans also seized upon another tantalizing clue, the recurrent symbol of the double axe, or labris, carved into the stone pillars and walls throughout the palace. He proposed that the word labyrinthos itself might mean house of the double axe, directly linking the palace with the mythical structure via this sacred Minoan symbol. However, modern linguistic scholarship is more cautious. While the labris was undoubtedly a significant religious symbol for the Minoans, the direct etymological leap to labyrinth as the name of the palace or a specific maze within it is now widely debated. Inscriptions in Linear B, the earliest attested form of Greek found at Knossos from a later period, show the word dapuritojo, which is believed to be a pre-Greek word for labyrinth, but its precise meaning and connection to the palace structure remain subjects of ongoing scholarly discussion. Scholars continue to debate the etymological origins of the word labyrinth and its specific connection, if any, to the Minoan labris or the palace at Knossos itself. Here lies the crux of the archaeological frustration. Despite the palace's undeniable complexity and its evocative labyrinthine feel, no structure precisely matching the mythical description of a deliberately designed, inescapable maze built to imprison the Minotaur has ever been unearthed at Knossos, or indeed anywhere else in Crete. There are no blueprints signed by Daedalus a long shot. Admittedly, no central chamber demonstrably designed for a monstrous occupant and littered with the bones of its victims. The surprisingly bad floor plan of legend, with its specific intent to confuse and trap, remains frustratingly elusive in the archaeological record. It's the ultimate historical MacGuffin. You sigh. Everyone's looking for it. The stories insist it's there, but the physical evidence plays a very good game of hide-and-seek, possibly designed by Daedalus himself. This lack of a definitive, purpose-built maze has led to various alternative theories about the labyrinth's origins. Crete is riddled with natural cave systems, some of which are incredibly extensive and complex. Could one of these, like the Skotino Cave, also known as Agia Paraskivi Cave, or the so-called Labyrinth Cave near Gorton, have been the original inspiration? These vast, dark, and naturally disorienting caverns certainly could have been perceived as labyrinths. Some speculate that these caves might have been used for ancient rituals or initiations, the memory of which became distorted and mythologized over time into the tale of the Minotaur's prison. This is a quirky, though plausible, fringe tidbit that the labyrinth wasn't built but found, a natural wonder co-opted by myth. Another theory points to the influence of Herodotus's description of the massive Egyptian mortuary temple complex at Hawara, which he explicitly called a labyrinth and described as surpassing even the pyramids in its bewildering intricacy. Perhaps tales of this distant architectural marvel filtered into Crete and became fused with local legends. Or could it be that the labyrinth was never meant to be a literal, physical place, but rather a powerful metaphor, a symbol for the bewildering and formidable nature of Minoan sea power as perceived by other Aegean cultures like the Athenians? A metaphor for a spiritual journey into the self, or for the inescapable complexities of the human mind? Perhaps the bad floor plan was a poetic way to describe the psychological torment of being held captive by a foreign power, or the tortuous path of navigating life's many challenges. Archaeologists continue their patient work at Knossos and other Minoan sites, constantly refining their understanding of this fascinating Bronze Age civilization. New discoveries are made, new interpretations proposed. Yet, the labyrinth as imagined by Daedalus, that unique structure of inescapable confusion, remains firmly in the realm of myth. When you visit Knossos today, you see Evans's sometimes controversial reconstructions, often using reinforced concrete, which aim to give visitors a sense of the palace's original scale, but have also been criticized for their speculative nature. You see replicas of the vibrant frescoes, the originals now housed in museums, and you feel the undeniable weight of millennia of myth and legend pressing in on the ancient stones. It's a place where history and mythology are so deeply intertwined that attempting to fully separate them, as one visitor wryly noted, is like trying to unbake a cake. The search for those specific stone corridors of utter confusion goes on, even if it's only in the labyrinth of our own imaginations. So, the hunt for Daedalus's labyrinth, those specific mythical stone corridors of absolute confusion, has, as we've seen, proven to be an archaeologist's ultimate cold case. Sir Arthur Evans gave us the magnificent, sprawling palace complex at Knossos, a place so intricate it certainly feels labyrinthine, a structure that may well have breathed life into the legend. Yet, the purpose-built prison for a singular, monstrous occupant, the architectural blueprint of inescapable despair designed by our genius inventor, remains elusive, a tantalizing ghost in the Cretan landscape. But here's the fascinating thing, even without a definitive street address or a set of ancient GPS coordinates. The labyrinth has not only survived, but thrived, transforming from a supposed physical place into something far more potent and enduring, a powerful, multifaceted symbol. Its stones may be lost to time or may never have been laid in the exact manner the myth describes. But the idea of the labyrinth, that surprisingly bad floor plan, has burrowed deep into the bedrock of human consciousness. You see its shadow, its echo, its intricate patterns woven through the tapestry of literature, art, and philosophy for millennia. The Roman poets, Ovid, Virgil, Pliny, were captivated by its tragic grandeur, its tale of heroism and monstrous aberration, ensuring its survival beyond the Greek world. Then, fast forward through the centuries, and you find a curious transformation. During the medieval period, the terrifying pagan labyrinth, home to a man-eating beast, underwent a remarkable rebranding. Intricate labyrinth patterns began to appear on the floors of great Christian cathedrals, like those at Chartres or Amiens in France. These were typically unicursal, single-path designs, and walking them became a symbolic act of pilgrimage, a meditative journey representing the winding, often arduous path to God or salvation. This is a well-documented historical fact. The labyrinth form, stripped of its Minotaur, was adapted to serve new spiritual needs, demonstrating its profound symbolic flexibility. The Renaissance, with its fervent rediscovery of classical antiquity, brought the Minotaur and his maze roaring back into artistic and literary focus, often depicted with a kind of ordered architectural grandeur that, as we've noted, sometimes seemed more like a pleasant palace wing than a place of terror. And from there, the labyrinth has continued its journey, appearing as a recurring motif in modern literature. Think of the complex, library-like maze in Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, or the existential shifting labyrinths in the stories of Jorge Luis Borges. It graces our movie screens, video games, and public art installations, each iteration exploring new facets of its ancient power. But what does it symbolize? This labyrinth that haunts our collective imagination? Its meanings are as numerous and winding as its mythical corridors. Most fundamentally, it stands as a metaphor for life's journey itself, a path rarely straight, often filled with unexpected twists, perplexing choices, frustrating dead ends, and the constant search for a center, for meaning, for a way through. It also beautifully or terrifyingly represents the human mind, our own inner worlds, your subconscious, your dreams, your buried memories, your tangled emotions, and your internal conflicts. What are these if not personal labyrinths we must all navigate? Trying to truly understand oneself, to confront one's own inner minotaurs, those fears, flaws, or unresolved issues, can be a far more daunting task than facing any physical beast. Honestly, you might think on a particularly challenging Tuesday, my own to-do list feels like a labyrinth designed by a slightly sadistic Daedalus, with the Minotaur of procrastination lurking around every corner. Beyond the personal, the labyrinth serves as a potent symbol for any complex, bewildering system. Think of a sprawling bureaucracy, where every form filled out leads to three more, and every phone call routes you through an endless automated menu. That, my friend, is a modern labyrinth, a bad floor plan of institutional design. Consider the intricate, often opaque workings of politics, the overwhelming tangle of information in our digital age, or societal structures that can feel impersonal, inescapable, and designed to keep you from reaching your goal. The labyrinth speaks to that universal feeling of being lost in a system much larger than yourself, a system whose logic is hidden or perhaps non-existent. It also mirrors the confusion of moral choices, those moments in life where the path isn't clear, where every option seems to lead to further complications, and the right way forward is shrouded in ambiguity. And, of course, it's a powerful metaphor for imprisonment, whether literal confinement or the feeling of being trapped by circumstances, by relationships, by societal expectations, or even by one's own limiting beliefs. Yet, conversely, the labyrinth can also represent a test, an initiation. It's a space one enters, confronts a profound challenge, be it an external monster or an internal demon, and, if successful, emerges transformed, possessed of new knowledge or strength, like Theseus stepping back into the light. The enduring appeal of that surprisingly bad floor plan lies in its validation of our own experiences with confusing, user-hostile environments. Whether they are poorly designed buildings, convoluted websites, or just the general glorious messiness of life. Daedalus, in crafting his architectural nightmare, inadvertently became the patron saint of anyone who has ever felt utterly bewildered by a structure or a system. Why does this ancient story, this unfound edifice, still hold such a powerful grip on us? The blend of its core elements is irresistible, the horror of the Minotaur, a creature born of divine wrath and human transgression, the sheer ingenuity of Daedalus, the flawed genius, and Ariadne, with her simple, brilliant solution, the heroism of Theseus, facing down death, and the layers of tragedy, Icarus's fall, Ariadne's abandonment, Aegeus's despair. It taps into primal fears, the fear of being lost, of being trapped, of the dark, of the unknown monster. It presents us with a quintessential puzzle, and the human mind loves a puzzle, loves the idea of finding a way through, of solving the labyrinth, even if only metaphorically in our own lives. Scholars and psychologists continue to explore why the labyrinth myth holds such enduring archetypal power, debating whether its resonance stems primarily from its narrative depiction of confronting the monstrous other, It's representation of the perilous journey of self-discovery, or it's tapping into fundamental human anxieties about confinement and disorientation. Interestingly, a quirky modern echo of the labyrinth's ancient allure can be seen in the resurgence of labyrinth walking as a contemplative or meditative practice. Often using the classical unicursal Cretan design, people walk these paths not in terror, but in search of peace, clarity, or spiritual insight. A contemporary reclaiming of the labyrinth's more ancient, pre-Minotaur associations with sacred journeying and finding a center. There are now labyrinth societies and directories of walkable labyrinths around the world, a testament to its adaptability. One imagines these modern labyrinth walkers, you might muse, are hoping for enlightenment or stress relief, probably with much better refreshment options than were available to the Athenian tributes. So, while those specific stone corridors built by Daedalus may never yield themselves to the archaeologist's trowel, the labyrinth has, in a sense, been found and rebuilt countless times. In our stories, our art, our philosophies, and our shared human experience. Its legacy isn't etched in stone blocks, but in its remarkable capacity to symbolize our own winding, confusing, challenging, and ultimately often rewarding paths through life. The surprisingly bad floor plan of King Minos' deepest fears somehow became a surprisingly durable and adaptable blueprint for one of humanity's most resonant myths. As our journey through the shadowy passages of this ancient tale and its enduring echoes begins to draw to a quiet close, we find ourselves perhaps not at an exit, but at a different kind of center, a place of reflection, where the lines between myth and meaning, between ancient stone and timeless symbol, become beautifully, intriguingly blurred. The light here is soft, diffused, like the last rays of a setting sun filtering through ancient olive trees, casting long, gentle shadows. The path you have walked, filled with divine anger, monstrous forms, ingenious solutions, and heartbreaking betrayals, now seems to lead to a quieter, more contemplative space. The sharp edges of the story begin to soften. The roars of the Minotaur fade into the whisper of the evening breeze, and the intricate, perplexing design of the labyrinth itself seems less a place of terror and more a reflection of the complex, often winding ways of human experience. You can almost feel the cool, ancient stones beneath your fingertips, smoothed by the passage of millennia, each one a silent witness to the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world, to navigate its bewildering beauty and its occasional, shadowy depths. The need for heroes, for cleverness, for a guiding thread, and the sorrow of loss. All these are woven into its very fabric. And as you prepare to leave this realm of myth and legend, perhaps you carry with you not a map of an ancient maze, but a deeper appreciation for the enduring power of a story to illuminate the labyrinths we all must face, in our own lives, in our own times. May your own paths be filled with courage. May you always find your thread. And may your dreams tonight be peaceful and clear. Sweet dreams.